Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Tetracast. This is RPG Site's weekly podcast where we get the site staff together to talk about our favorite genre of video games. I hope all of you listening are preparing for a fun, Turkey Day if you're in America, because I know we are missing a few people from the podcast due to that holiday. My name is Brian Vitale. Adam is not here today. He is in the middle of traveling. Joining me, we do have a few of the regular crew. We've got Josh Torres.
Super Saiyan Shaggy is canon.
We've got James Galizio.
Hey, folks.
And joining us once again for the first time in a few weeks, we've got Chow Min Woo.
How's it going?
I guess this also means we're missing George again. I miss that dude. I miss that goofball.
Yeah, he's just for a little behind the scenes. Like George has kind of moved on to other outlets. He still will be here and there on the podcast, but he has other obligations as he's working for multiple outlets now.
Yeah, and he also just recently moved, so he might still be doing stuff on that as well. He is tied up. He is busy in either case. So obviously for the last couple of weeks, we've been talking about the big November release of Shin Megami Tensei and a few other releases such as James's dive into Undernauts last week, which I assume you're working on. Are you going to be reviewing that for us, James?
Yes, I finished it up, and I'm going to get the review written up this weekend.
All right, so we'll probably table that for next week once you've got your final thoughts kind of collected and written up. But we do have a couple...
Well, I mean, I finished the game. I just haven't done the post game.
Are you going to do that before the review?
Probably not, because I'm actually away from my Xbox at the moment, and I played it on Xbox. So
plus we're all crunched for time as we kind of talk about repeatedly going into the end of the year. But there were a couple of releases in this last week. One of them a surprise out of nowhere, and a couple of them we were expecting. And the big one for the week, well, maybe you don't agree with this, but I'm going to say it anyway, is the Pokemon remasters. We got Pokemon Shining Pearl and Brilliant Diamond. So I know that some of us have been looking forward to these. Some of us have been not looking forward to these. There's been a lot of leaks. There's been a lot of pre-release discussion for those games. But I do know that James has been putting time into them, and he's been maybe a dozen or so hours into the remasters. So to start out, I will just hand it off to him to talk about his experience so far, at least, with the Pokemon Shining Pearl and Brilliant Diamond Generation 4 remakes.
Right. So when these remakes first got announced, there was a lot of disappointment because previously when a game was remade, it was brought up to the visual quality and kind of feature set of the Pokemon generation that was current at the time. So like when Red and Blue got remade as Fire Red and Leaf Green, they were brought in line with Generation 3's like graphical presentation at the time. When Gold and Silver remade, they were brought in like up to par with Generation 4's graphical presentation at the time. And same thing with Generation 3. So when Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl got announced as remakes, and they were top-down, very traditional like remakes of the original games versus what we have seen in the past, where I guess technically, except for Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire, was like the same thing, because back then they were still top-down. But when Generation 8, when Sword and Shield made such a big deal about going full 3D, having stuff like the wild area and whatnot, a lot of people, well, at least I saw a lot of people very disappointed that Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl were still very clearly cut from the same cloth. Maybe that's not the best way of putting it. They were expecting it to have a bit more of a radical departure just because of how the series has progressed. I was one of those people, but over time, and I think I've said this on the podcast before, this is the first mainline Pokemon game that's actually not being developed by, or hasn't been developed by Game Freak. This time around, it was developed by Ilka. I don't know what else they've done. I think they've done support work on a lot of games previously.
Yeah, I do remember that we talked about this on a previous podcast when we were talking about its unique art style. We were talking about how this was kind of the change that the Pokemon Company or Monsters or Creatures Inc. or whoever's in charge needed to do if they were going to start working on multiple games and still kind of keep like this weird annual release cadence. Because obviously, Ilka developed these remakes while Pokemon Company and Game Freak is working on Arceus for next year.
Yeah,
which I think is a good move.
Presumably Generation 9, though who knows whenever that's going to come out, because it's like if Arceus is next year, it's like, okay, well, what are they going to have for the holiday title? Because there's always a holiday Pokemon title. Will it
Pokemon
be...
Sleep, it's finally time.
But anyways, as I mentioned in the past, over time I've kind of come to appreciate the decision making that went into being like, okay, so we're going to have a new studio start working on remakes, and being like a kind of the Call of Duty approach where you have different studios juggling different releases, so each studio gets a longer development cycle. But obviously when you do that, there needs to be an onboarding project. Like obviously, like even with Call of Duty back when they before they really had these different studios working on their own, they would have them as support studios for other Call of Duties. And then once they got used to the workflow, then they would be given their own project. And I feel like that's something that we're seeing with Ilka here. So they were given Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl because these are games that have already been made. And by remaking them, it's like you have asset creation, of course, though most of the Pokemon models are already made. But it's an easier project, if that makes sense.
I looked it up just now just to provide some context to myself. They did work on Pokemon Home, and then some of the projects they assisted on were kind of all over the place. Yakuza 0, Dragon Quest 11, NieR Automata. So I don't know to what extent they assisted on those, but this is according to a Nintendo Life article back when these remakes were first released or first announced.
Anyways, so enough rambling. I'm still pretty early on in the remakes, and there are some issues that a lot of people have had with regards to it being based off of Diamond and Pearl and not Platinum, which
I was gonna ask about that, but I will let you go on.
So Generation 4 was kind of infamous because Diamond and Pearl themselves, while they were great games, I still think they're great games, they had a lot of issues with them. One of the major ones was the pacing. For whatever reason, they were very slow paced. Your walking speed was slow, your surfing speed was slow, battles took longer, and the games themselves just felt very slow paced. And Platinum fixed a lot of that. One of the other things they fixed is that the Pokemon variety in Sinnoh, at least with Diamond and Pearl, was pretty poor. It was like infamous in the sense that if you wanted to have a fire Pokemon, you either had to choose the fire starter or you had to catch a Ponyta. Because those were the only two fire type Pokemons you could get before the post game.
You're like, this is like a nostalgia bomb for me. Like, I remember that. I remember thinking like there are so few fire types in this game. There's like none.
Yeah. So Platinum fixed things up by adding a few more Pokemon from the National Dex into the Sinnoh Pokedex, including some extra Fire-type Pokemon. And so, ever since Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, there's been some discontent in the Pokemon fan base about how, okay, so Heart Gold and Soul Silver, they incorporated the elements of Pokemon Crystal into the games. It had the Crystal storyline, it had the Crystal content, and sure, you could say, well, Crystal itself wasn't actually that big of a departure from Gold and Silver, which it really wasn't, but there was an expectation that Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire would incorporate the stuff from Emerald. They did not. So there was always some worry when Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl were announced that, oh, well, it's kind of important that there's the Platinum content in these games, because there were some very real issues with the original Diamond and Pearl. Unfortunately, Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl don't, for the most part, incorporate the Platinum content. But that's not as big of an issue as you might think at first, because one of the things they did do is they expanded the Underground. So in Diamond and Pearl, you had the Underground, which was kind of an extension of the secret base system from Generation 3, where you can like explore underneath the Sinnoh region, you can mine for stuff, and you can find things like evolutionary stones, like heart scales, you can build up secret bases. You can play online and the underground and all that. And it was an interesting distraction. Not a huge deal. I feel like most people played around with it for like a few hours and then pretty much never touched it again because it was like a distraction. But beyond that, it didn't really add too much to the experience. And they've expanded it greatly with Brilliant Diamond, Shining Pearl. First off, the underground itself is much, much larger than it was in the original games. And in fact, to account for that, it's called the Grand Underground now. And there's even little pockets where you can find wild Pokemon. And different Pokemon can spawn there that might not necessarily be found in the Sinnoh normally. So you can find other fire-type Pokemon there. You can find like Houndour. You can find, I think, Vulpix or Growlithe, depending on your version. You can, in your secret base, you can set up these statues you can find while excavating walls, which if you place them down will increase the spawn rate for different types of Pokemon, which you can then take into account for when you're exploring the different pockets, the different dens in the Grand Underground in order to like build up your team with Pokemon that you otherwise wouldn't be able to find in Generation 4, at least before the post-game. And overall, it's a lot more fun. It's a great extension of what the system was before, and even though I haven't gotten to the post-game yet, one of the things I do know about it is that in order to access Reminisce Park or use the facilities in it, you have to get certain slates from the Grand Underground that you randomly excavate. So even if you don't care about the new changes to Pokemon you can find in there, if you want to do the post game, you actually have to interact with the Grand Underground, and it makes it feel like it's a much more integral part of the experience. And that's a really
cool. You were mentioning earlier like how the original releases felt really slow, walk speed was slow, surfing was slow. Does this re-releases fix those? No?
No, I mean it does fix it.
Okay.
That was like the one thing I was never worried about. And honestly, besides the visuals, I feel like I've always felt that, well, most of Diamond and Pearl's problems like are the Pokemon variety, which from the very beginning we kind of knew that was going to be somewhat fixed with the Grand Underground, and the speed, which has been fixed because they're never going to make that mistake again. But don't get me wrong, I love Platinum. It's still probably my favorite game in the series, but a lot of the additions that it brought to the formula aren't actually that major. Like, the Battle Frontier was the main one, but stuff like, oh, you can get a bunch more legendary Pokemon. Every Pokemon game now allows you to do that. It's like, who cares?
Well, for me, I spent a ton of time in Platinum growing up. Like, Platinum was the last Pokemon game I really put a lot of time into, and I got like the black trainer card or whatever because I did like everything. And I guess I burned myself out for like a decade or more. 16 years. How long has it been since Platinum? I don't want to look it up. But
I think that was 2009, or was it 2008?
One of those, yeah. So
it came out 2009.
All right, so I actually was a bit older then. I guess that's why I went like gung ho and doing all the challenges and all the completionist stuff. But I never put a lot of time into Diamond or Pearl, so I don't actually have like a good latch on specifically what are the differences between Diamond Pearl and what Platinum added. So I don't know, like, if when you tell me that these remakes are based on Diamond Pearl and not Platinum, I don't know what that means. So I would have to like play it and like try to notice like what is absent here, what is not how I remember it. I do remember before these remakes released, people were trying to like scrutinize the screenshots to see like where certain NPCs were located in certain cities and being like, aha, this person's in their Platinum position. Maybe this game is actually based on Platinum. But I guess what you're telling me is that it's not. They are based on Diamond and Pearl.
Yeah.
So
overall, it doesn't matter too much because, again, like I feel like a lot of people just have rose-tinted glasses about Platinum, being like, "Oh man, this is something I love about Generation 4, so it has to be exclusive to Platinum." When most of the time, it's not. It's just you've heard for so long people talking about, oh, Diamond and Pearl were bad, and then Platinum made it great, and it's like, no, it's not so much like that. It's like Diamond and Pearl were still great games. It was just issues with the pacing and the Pokemon variety that really held them back, and that stuff that it's fixed by these remakes.
Yeah, not beholden to be Platinum version to do that.
Yeah. So, anyways, I'm enjoying it. Having a good time. Definitely have more thoughts next week once I'm further along.
For future like remakes or re-releases of older games, would you like them to stick to this sort of like chibi art style that's kind of a more I don't know, evolved version of what you would see like in the older Pokemon games, I guess?
I don't know. I feel like there is merit in trying something different with remakes, but if they're going to be doing stuff like the Pokemon Legends series, and maybe they're going to be more like gutsy or ballsy with messing around with, oh, here's like a Pokemon region, what can we do with it? I think having a more traditional remake while also having a side series for something that's not really a remake, but more of like a reimagining, there's some merit there, if that makes sense.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I've seen people enjoy these re-releases. I haven't really heard too much about like,
This is going to be a hot take.
Mhm.
I'm enjoying these more than the Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire.
All right. Okay. Yeah.
I
Seems
do wonder
pretty
how
good.
I do wonder how extensive the post game will be, because I remember I always have to pull back like a decade plus, because that's how long I've been since getting early into Pokemon. But the Fire Red, Leaf Green Game Boy Advance games, I remember those. Like the post game took me twice as long as the main game, but of course they were based on Red and Blue or Red and Green, so they didn't have much of a base game. They had a very very straightforward campaign, or whatever you
Yeah,
want to call it.
it's funny because everyone like always talks about, oh, Heart Gold and Soul Silver are the best remakes. They add the most, but if you actually look at what they added the least. Like Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire added more to the Ruby and Sapphire, and like Fire Red and Leaf Green by and far added the most to Generation 1, just because like the Sevi Islands are basically a region in and of itself.
And I remember a lot of those islands, you had to be like, remember like the old mystery gift system where you had to like go to a GameSpot and download like a ticket or whatever to get access to island 7, 8, and 9, or something like that. My memory's foggy on those.
It was islands 8 and 9, and that was for Deoxys and Lugia or Ho-Ho respectively, I think.
So I have a really dumb anecdote. I don't know why I'm sharing this now, but it's on top of my head. I remember for the DS, it did not support most Wi-Fi security protocols. It only supported, I think, WPA. I don't remember quite all the acronyms. So what I had to do is I would have to like go to our router at home when I was a kid and like disable the security in order to be able to access the internet on my DS to get those like mystery tickets or whatever. So that's how gung ho I was right until Platinum, and then at that point I don't know, I had gotten my fill of Pokemon, so I haven't played it since. But it's cool to see that there is some surprisingly good qualities to these remakes. I know that I think people were just kind of looking for a reason to hate on them, and the leaks were pre day one patch,
Yeah, we should probably talk about that a bit. Not too long, but basically these are the first Pokemon games where there is an actual day one patch that drastically impacts the game. Like, aspects of the post game were not playable without the day one patch. Half the music in the game were just literally the same MIDIs from the original games lapped into the game until the day one patch, which added in the rest of the remixes. There was not an opening movie until the day one patch. There was a ton of graphical glitches and bugs before the day one patch. And it's just that definitely didn't help the perception of the games like leading up to launch, because when you have somebody playing a game like over a week early talking about it, and like obviously with Pokemon, regardless of like what Nintendo or the Pokemon company wants to happen, they always get leaked like at least a week ahead of time. And it's always going to be the leaks that really kind of sets the tone for things. So when the game is unfinished without the day one patch, it just like lots of people just saw the leaks and are like, oh man, that's really disappointing, even though what they would actually be playing, assuming they have Wi-Fi, which in this day and age, I mean, you'll at least have access to a connection long enough to download the patch.
Yeah.
But just a very unfortunate situation there. Hopefully enough people have heard that, yeah, the patch fixes things up. It's actually a decent remake now.
It is a rough situation. It reminds me, going back all the way to like the Xbox One launch of like there are definitely some people that just live in remote regions that don't have easy access to like a network connection of any kind.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I'm just saying that it's like, I feel like it's reasonable to say that people can find a place to download a singular patch. It's not like they have to always be online. It's just download the patch. And not even that. If they have a friend that has like Wi-Fi at their house, it can literally just say, hey, can you come over with your Switch? And then you can share the update data that way because you can share it locally.
It's one of those things that's like it's a hard like thing to like solve for those like for those use cases, because those cases are getting like more minimal as time goes on and whatnot. But because like the reality of game development these days is like things really come in hot, and like people are trying to get dev work done, like by the last stretch.
Especially during COVID, like the majority of this game's development must have been during COVID.
Yeah.
And we talked about that on the context of getting like release code, where we play a game. I guess the most egregious in recent memory would be Cyberpunk, but also like Pathfinder, where it's like, man, this game's buggy, but maybe it'll be fixed on day one, but I'm playing it early, so I don't know like how much I should focus on this. And then for some games they're fixed right away, and then for some games they certainly aren't. It's good to see that Pokemon was more of the former, but luckily it seems like that all the major issues have been sorted out.
Then there are going to be the ones that have the opposite problem, where they're working fine, and then like let's say a DLC thing comes out and kind of screws everything over. It's like, oh, I shouldn't touch this game until it's fixed.
Mm-hmm.
Super Robot Wars.
Or in the rare case where you have a review and it's like, if you didn't finish the game before the embargo lifted, somehow your save data got wiped.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah.
That never happens.
Yeah, never happened.
We did also get a very surprising release in the last week. So this was always slated for 2021, but we haven't heard about it in a long time, since I believe E3. And that is one of the Riot Forge projects, obviously the creators, publishers, overmasters of League of Legends, where they have been kind of moving their IPs into different areas. I know they recently had an Arcane show that launched over the last month. They've got an MMO in the works, but another project that they had that was of interest to us was Ruined King, a League of Legends story. This is a turn-based RPG being developed by Airship Syndicate, who is the team behind Battle Chasers Night War and Darksiders Genesis. I played both those games. I think I actually reviewed both those games for the site. So I was always interested in Ruined King, not because I have any history at all with League of Legends. I am a complete neophyte when it comes to that. But I had appreciated, I'll put it that way, Airship Syndicate's recent output. I didn't love Genesis, but I thought Battle Chasers was actually really quite unique and interesting. It is always cool to see turn-based, basically JRPG-inspired type games from a Western developer. And that's what Ruined King is. It basically shadow dropped last week, so we didn't know about it. I don't think any outlets had, or at least none of the smaller ones, had any heads up that this game was going to be releasing without any other prior announcement. But it's here, and I put about 10 to 12 hours into it so far. And all of my impressions are basically knowing Airship Syndicate, but not knowing League of Legends at all. So if you've played Battle Chasers Night War, which I believe was 2017, maybe 18, this game is clearly built on that framework mechanically. But of course, everything is flavored League of Legends style. So this is basically going to be my gateway into this lore, which I know a lot of people who are going to be playing this game already know which characters they hope to see, and already know the environment, and already know like the setting and the lore and all of that. And I know none of it. So basically, I will have things that I am learning really quickly, and then also I will have gaps in terms of not knowing what I don't know. Like when something's referenced and I don't know, is that important or is that not?
I have a question right away.
Go ahead.
Do you need to know MOBA mechanics to play this game? Do you need to know who takes mid, who jungles, who's the carry, who's the support? Do I need to know that going to this game?
I'm going to say no, but I will say that one of my immediate takeaways is that so I'm like my brother, I'm kind of a bit of a mechanics numbers nerd and a little bit less on like story lore. But immediately when you turn this game on, it is a turn-based RPG, and different characters that you get kind of serve different roles, kind of like an RPG, very classic. This person is a healer, this person does damage, this person gets aggro and does like more supporty things and prevents your team from taking damage. And I can kind of glean how this character might have worked in the League of Legends just based on how they have been adapted into this game. Even though obviously I don't know what their I'm kind of working backwards here. Like for instance, there's this character called Yasuo. He seems pretty cool. He's like a samurai. He's called an Ionian. I don't know what any of these things mean, but the game is teaching me. So other people might know exactly like where this character came from, how long they've been in League of Legends. I assume if they're in this spin-off game that they're a popular character. But the game immediately kind of shows you how each character has a very unique set of mechanics that is bespoke to them, where only they can do these certain things. For instance, Yasuo, whenever he does his most basic attack, he puts on a debuff called Steel Tempest. Steel Tempest is a stacking debuff that once you get full stacks of it, it basically means that his next ultimate attack will take less mana and recharge more quickly. Which that's kind of like a very simple mechanic, but also he can get more Steel Tempest, his stacking buff, whenever he criticals, and he also has another ability that increases his critical rate. So it's kind of like these series of mechanics that all interlock together in a very smart way, which I can kind of see like, oh, I bet that's sort of how it worked in his role in League of Legends, which I only know at the very basic framework about how MOBA champions work. So I can't really go more eloquently than that. Another character that's in this game, Braum, whenever he does his basic attack, he does a unique. This sounds a little bit crude, but he has a basic debuff called Concussion, where he stacks concussion on his enemies, and then once those concussion stacks max out, those enemies are either stunned or take extra damage upon those stacks capping out. And then there's certain other like ways where their basic attack can do concussion. They can do like a lane. What they call them here is a lane attack, which I don't know if a lane attack is something from the base game, or if they're kind of just using that terminology to tie to the lanes in League of Legends. But basically you have your instant attacks that don't take mana, but then your lane attacks do. So you can't spam your lane attacks. You kind of have to do your instant attacks like Braum's concussion stacking and Steel Tempest stacking. And then basically that kind of buffs your character up through these basic abilities, which then you get to decide how to use once you're ready to expend some mana on some more powerful ones. Once you do these more powerful lane abilities, what this game's kind of unique most, it's kind of its defining battle mechanic, I think, is that let's say I'm doing Yasuo's ability called Sweeping Blade. It is a lane ability that grants a stack of Steel Tempest whenever it criticals. And it also damages basically every target and every nearby target. So if there's a group of 3 enemies and you target the middle one, it will hit all 3. So kind of has like this cleaving effect. But when you decide I want to have Yasuo use this ability, you choose, do I want to do it in the speed lane? Do I want to do it in the balance lane? Or do I want to do it in the power lane? And basically what lane you do it in determines how fast it will execute and how much damage it will do. So if I'm doing his ability and I really need it to basically get off before the enemy gets a turn, I will do it in the speed lane because I'm low on health or because I'm about to die or whatever. Or if I do it in the power lane, and it's going to do more damage and will do enough to kill the enemy, even though it'll take longer to charge. I might just do that, and maybe the payoff is worth it. And during battle, and I think a few other games, I can't think of a specific example offhand, but at the bottom of the screen, there is essentially kind of a timeline. It'll say like, here's currently acting, here's who's going to attack next, and here's who's going to attack after that. And after you pick which ability you're going to do, it'll basically show you when your attack will launch and also when your next turn will be. That idea in itself is very kind of well worn.
Yeah,
a lot of
that's
games,
an
a lot of games do that.
interesting concept. It's like timeline manipulation, but tied to like attacks.
Right. And like, so the timeline is not, it's basically got two axes. It's not just the next upcoming abilities is to the farthest left and the furthest one is to the farthest right, but there's kind of a Y axis to it. There's like 3 layers. So think of like a grid where the upper layer is I'm using a speed lane ability. So that'll appear there. And then the lower layer is the power lane. And here's the thing that I'm dancing around is that certain aspects of the timeline will have like an effect on it where if you land in this part of the timeline, you will get healed, or you will get an attack buff, or you'll get a speed buff. So that's kind of another factor where you will want to decide if I have Yasuo use his ability that I mentioned, and have him so when I have Yasuo using his lane ability, which is his mana consuming ability, and I see in the timeline it shows his icon appear where he's going to unleash that. If I have him land in a region of the timeline that has his heal effect on it, that means he will get healed when that time passes into the present. So I know this is a lot of words to try to explain how it works, but kind of what I want to.
I'm picturing it. It sounds like something like you'd see like in like the Falcom games and the Trails games, like how you manipulated that timeline.
Oh, that's actually a great. No, I'm so glad you brought that up. That's actually a great example where. All right, so anyone who hasn't played this game, obviously, but has played any recent or not even recent, pretty much any game in that Kiseki Trail series, where you might want to time an art spell so that a character casts that art at the same time the critical bonus is appearing, or the same time the CP bonus is appearing. That's exactly it. Only now it's kind of like you're trying to land in a spot where you will get healed, or where you'll get an attack buff or a speed buff. So
that's ironic because that was actually taken out of Kuro.
Oh, all right.
Yeah.
All right, so
it's replaced with different stuff, but yeah.
All right, so you can play a Ruined King instead. So
there you go.
So basically, and the thing is, one thing that I like about Ruined King is that it kind of gives you this. It doesn't kind of spoon feed you, but it doesn't dump it all on you at once. It's got a very brisk pace where it's like you start out with one character. Here is that character's specific passives. They're very bespoke bonuses to them. The first character that you play at is named Misfortune. And her passive is that she has, I forget what the bonus is called, but she basically gets a stacking buff every time she evades damage, and every time a turn passes where she goes faster and faster and faster. They call that speed. They call that attribute haste in this game. So basically, for her, you're encouraged to deal damage when you can, but if you think you're about to take damage, you can try to evade the incoming attack so that you keep your stacking buff going, because it might pay off in the long run. And this game, like, it'll introduce, here's this character's bespoke kind of, this is how they work. And by the way, this is how their instant and how their lane abilities kind of synchronize and how they kind of have this synergy to them. Here's how the timeline system works in battle, and how these passives work. And the last thing that I didn't mention yet is that sometimes a character will be like a fast wolf, and it'll say this wolf enemy will evade a third of every attack, like a 33% chance to evade any attack except speed lane attacks. So for certain enemies, regardless of what your other goals are, you might want to use a very specific attack because the enemy has an inherent weakness to it. Or you'll have this big brute enemy that says this brute enemy will take half damage from all attacks except the power attack. If you do powered attack, you might stagger it, and then it'll be susceptible to everything. So there's already like these interlocking systems, these interlocking passives, and there's no formula to decide if I always do these abilities in this order, I will win. unless you're playing on the easiest difficulty, maybe. There's always kind of like, well, if I do a power attack, I'm going to do more damage, and I'll do enough to kill the wolf in one hit, but he has a 33% chance of evading it. So maybe I'll do a speed attack instead so that I know I guarantee the hit, and I'll take that buff off him. Or I can maybe, do a passive instead of attacking the enemy at all. So it's just right away, there's just a lot of like mechanics to really consider. And I can kind of see like, all right, I've got a party of 3 characters and they all work in slightly different ways. And I can kind of see like, all right, that I wonder how this champion, this must be the role that they played in the base game. Though of course I can't really quite know that because I don't have the firsthand experience. So that's kind of how battles and how characters work. There's also like a pretty robust system of progression where characters have equipment slots, and the equipment is kind of a very classic, Diablo-esque loot-based gear system where you'll have like different rarities of gear. Each gear will have like a level. Like you might have like a level 7 epic sword, but then you find like a level 10 common sword, but it might be actually better in some ways. And the gear, as far as I can tell, is semi-randomized, so it's not like most JRPGs where you kind of get bespoke upgrades at certain points, whether you get to a new shop or you find it in a treasure chest in a dungeon. It seems like it's a little bit more just random drops. So you'll have reasons to like revisit areas and kill enemies and hope to get new materials to craft or whatever. There is a crafting, there is fishing, there are basic skill trees, there are you can enchant items using materials. And I'm not going to go into the weeds of all these systems, but basically there is a lot to mess with in terms of you already learn how to use the character actively in battle, what abilities you should use in what order to be most effective. But then based on how you decide you want to use a character, you can kind of design their setup and their gear setup and their skill tree setup around that, where you might for Yasuo, you might set up his gear so that he just does, you're buffing up his attack stat. That's all you care about. Or you can buff up his critical stat specifically because you know that kind of interacts with his abilities and his kind of how his battle style works in terms of his stacking buff that he gets when he crits enemies instead of going for raw damage all the time. So there's basically just a lot to chew on, and it's more in depth than I expected going in, which has been
a lot of systems.
Yeah, it's been really refreshing. So this isn't basically. It's kind of weird because I have a feeling like maybe for League of Legends players who already have to tackle, I presume, a lot of systems, this might be kind of natural to them, and it's also natural to anyone who has experience with RPGs. But it's not really designed as like I thought maybe going in that this might be like a very kind of shallow. My first RPG experience or something, but it's really not that. It's really quite involved and in depth.
And you don't really need any League of Legends background to enjoy it, sounding like.
The thing is I'm sure you would enjoy it more where you see a character that you recognize. Like there's this character that has a really kind of they're very mysterious. I think her name was Henri, and I have no idea who this person is. I haven't gotten them in my party yet or whatever.
To this game, wow, spoilers, man.
well, the thing is that like if you go into like the equipment menus, it kind of tells you who all the characters you get are. So you don't have to dive outside the game to learn even from the second hour, third hour who's all going to join you, because you'll see like menus that say this is gear for Henri, this is gear for Braum, this is gear for Yasuo.
Okay, so it's funny. So you can get gear for like future party members that haven't joined you yet, basically.
It's not gear. So there's a journal system that's basically like voice logs or voice like basically audio diaries, journal entries, things like that. And I can see like Tome of Knowledge for it's not Henri, it's Ari. Sorry, I don't know my League of Legends characters. I'm just learning them for the first time.
They're malding right now. They're like, finally, they corrected it.
All right. There's Misfortune, Yasuo, Pike, Alawi, Braum, Ari. I guess that's it, unless there's a secret character or something. I will say, though, that the story and the writing, I'm not going to say it's bad, but it's kind of very blunt. It's very like efficiently written where dialogue lines are kind of short and to the point and very simply stated, where there's not a lot to chew on. It's like, for instance, Braum, his history is basically He's from a village. I don't remember what it's called. He's like the Nordic kind of Norsey character, and he basically was seeking medicine for his village, and he heard a rumor that the Blessed Isles had this holy water that could heal any ailment. However, the Blessed Isles have been overrun by this entity called the Black Mist. So now they're known as the Shadow Isles. So it's just like very blunt. It's just very like, I guess it's a very simple premise, but maybe it's fine. And maybe that's how the lore of the League of Legends is. I don't know, but I'm really enjoying kind of like the mechanics, the RPG, the progression, the battles more than I am the setting or the characters. But they're not bad. They're just kind of like fine. They're there. They're very distinct, I will say, between the characters. Very different, distinct manners of speaking, which kind of goes with like, I guess they're from different races. Like I mentioned that Yasuo is an Ionian, Braum is this Nordic countryman, which I forget. It's like Fjordgia or something like that. And I'm sure that these areas, if you're going into the game with any League of Legends knowledge, is very, you're well aware of these, but I'm not. This game takes place in Bilgewater, which is kind of like a pirate's haven, which is kind of interesting to me because as an outsider, this will be my last. This is basically the last thing I wanted to touch on, is that when I think of League of Legends as an outsider, I think of very like traditional fantasy, but like with a sense of like Magitech sort of to it. That's just kind of my
Because
just
like when I think of League of Legends, like I always think of like the forest area because that's like the map I see when I never see footage of it. So like it being taking place like in the Pirates Cavern, I'm like, oh, that's cool, because all I really see in League of Legends from my outsider perspective, is the typical MOBA map built with like jungling phase and like I said that typical forest map like you see like in Dota also, and you see like in when. What are other popular MOBAs? I think of like this is a sign of how old I am in this. It's like I used to play like the beta of like Heroes of New Earth, and like what other MOBAs are there?
I guess heard such a good
Smite.
Smite.
What was the Blizzard ones? It's Heroes of the Storm. That's its whole thing. Yeah.
But
Pokemon Unite.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, Pokemon Unite.
So the whole game doesn't take place in Bilgewater, but it seems like that's a major. It's where you start out, and I'm like 10 hours in, and I haven't left that. So Bilgewater is like a pirate's haven. So everything's like corsairs and swashbucklers and shipwrecks and pirates and blunderbusses and things like that, which is not something I really like. Obviously, I'm an outsider to this franchise, to this IP. And I'm like, is this a major part of the IP, or do they just pick a very specific region? And that's what they're focusing on, because that's just not quite the aesthetic that I expect out of League of Legends. So it's very specific, and it's just not what I expected, but it kind of works.
So you go into League of Legends, install League of Legends, then read the novels, then read the upcoming rhythm game, then play that Project L fighting game, then watch the Arcane show, Arcana, whatever, and you'll find out.
Yeah,
Easy.
so
don't forget, they're also making an MMO.
And the MMO when it comes out.
Yeah, so the MMO I'm guessing will be obviously will have the time and resources likely to really dive into all the different aspects of the lore that have been built up in League of Legends over the last decade plus or whatever.
Do you think you'll visit Bilgewater in the MMO?
I am sure you will, because apparently it's a pretty major location, or it's either a major location or a location that they just kind of randomly picked for the. I have no idea how important Bilgewater is to League of Legends. Is it important at all? Basically, if this is my exposure to League of Legends at all, and Bilgewater is where it takes place, I'm like, oh, it must be a fairly important place. I guess Bilgewater is a city on the Serpent Isles, which is nearby the Shadow Isles, which obviously used to be the Blessed Isles, but now there's this Black Mist, which is kind of like, right now I don't know who the antagonist is. It's just this Black Mist kind of every so often kind of tries to overtake the area and unleashes like these ghostly apparitions that have to be pushed back. But I don't know the source. I don't know why. I don't know how. So that's kind of like what I'm hoping this RPG's story will touch into.
It'll just the ending credits will scroll by, and then the last post credits thing is going to be go play the game, the MOBA. That'll be the message if you want to know more.
I will say though that the art style is very reminiscent of Battle Chasers. It's got like those CGI artsy cut-ins that are basically almost look like they're lifted from the same game, because obviously it's the same art talent behind it in that Joe Madura style. As far as I can tell, it kind of fits the characters. I think the character portraits are really well detailed. It's kind of got that Western comic booky feel to it.
Yeah.
So maybe a little bit like aimed at a younger audience, maybe, which might be interesting because I don't really think of League of Legends as that, but maybe it is. Well, I guess League of Legends is like, universities have pro teams for that game specifically. So I don't know. But
my university has a pro League of Legends team, I think.
Dang.
So all these Gen Z League of Legends players they'll find something here in this very turn-based RPG. I don't know how much of that overlap between those two audiences are, but I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying it more than I did Battle Chasers, and I think that's just because it has more interesting systems going on. Where Battle Chasers was a little bit more kind of by numbers, where this seems like it, as far as I can tell, really smartly adapting some of the League mechanics into this new framework. But I'm hoping to get through this game. Based on like my progress so far, I don't think it's going to be very long, which is a nice change of pace considering the last two games I've been playing have been Pathfinder and Shin Megami Tensei. I'm interested to see what my final thoughts on this coalesce into by the time we get to the end of the year stuff. But I'm having a better time than I thought I would going in.
That's cool. Yeah, that is really cool to see it shadow drop, and then like even cooler to see it like, hey, it's actually a really, really good game, and it seems like a lot of the Steam reviews, it's generally been very positive for that game. I want to try it out. It seems like a lot of fun, but once again, I want to try it like a 10 million games before Game of the Year, and that's just not going to happen.
Yep.
So I got to pick and choose my battles. I'm still I'm like almost 40 hours into SMT5, like the middle of the third zone. Hopefully, I'll get that done soon, especially with Thanksgiving break coming up.
When are you two getting back to Fantasia?
A good fucking question.
Yeah, my goal for the end of the year was finish Ruined King, finish Shin Megami Tensei, and finish Fantasia. Because then I think I'll hit like the major highlights, despite having some time taken away from me from life stuff. But I don't know if I'm going to get that far. So
I think hopefully I can get the Fantasia after the SMT. But then there's like other like smaller things, like I should probably try to like get into Omori as well, because a lot of people really love that, and that was like, it would, I don't know, it would feel weird to like give that oversight on the Game of the Year stuff, but it's tough, it's scheduling
and
stuff.
Apparently Ender Lilies was great, which I don't know if I'll have time for, and things like that.
Yep, exactly.
This is the cross we must bear as an
yeah, and like I bought
And
Death's Door like the other day, and like I really wanted like to try out Death's Door as well, because I bought that on sale. Just like,
thankfully, Death's Door is pretty short. You can get that done like 8-10 hours.
Okay.
But there's so many 8-10 hour games.
Yeah. Yep. And then it's a bad thing to like think about, but like there's already all like so many cool like indie games coming out like early December that's like that we just like by default won't get to until a later time, because like the general rules of Game of the Year is like anything released in December now is like we'll hold it off till next year. So like stuff like Cyberpunk and Omori now we can talk about in this Game of the Year, but like stuff that's coming out this December, like that this is by default. Oh, we have to do Game of the Year stuff. We'll think about that later.
Yeah, it's like we go into the next year immediately with a coverage backlog almost. Fun. And that's with a lot of stuff releasing like in February and March. January is a little bit more open, thankfully. I guess we got Arceus there.
Yeah,
at least next year is going to be a lot easier with Elden Ring. It's like already number one.
Hopefully.
We'll see. Let's see. Yeah, did you have any final thoughts on Ruined King that you wanted to end off on?
I think I'll for right now I'm still too early to have like concluding thoughts. I think my initial impressions are great. That's okay, cool. But you had mentioned picking your battles. And I'm going to use that to segue into your next topic.
I didn't pick my battles well this week, apparently. Well, I did for one of them. One of those Halo multiplayer shadow dropping and early, and that was a really cool surprise. And I've been James and I have been having a ton of fun with that. I was thinking about, I was like, maybe I should do the first Super Robot Wars 30 DLC because that added Sakura Wars, Voltus 5, and whatnot. But that seems to be having issues like that. Like that came out like around Tuesday night for early access people who bought the deluxe and ultimate editions. Um, but even to this day, which is the time of this recording, Saturday like afternoon, um, like that still hasn't been fixed because on like the first immediate like bug that people noticed with that DLC was like, hey, one of the major units in like that game is like they disappear. Like Izuru's Red 5 from Majestic Prince, like that unit is just gone from your roster, and you have to either do like a mandatory story mission that force deploys him, which in my case I don't have any left because I'm in post game now, so I don't have any of those left. So it kind of deletes him for whatever reason, and then people have been suffering like all sorts of like weird issues. Like there are some issues where like certain dialogue plays that could crash the game, and they try to do like spells in battle that might crash the game, and it just seems like a mess right now that I don't want to deal with, especially if it might like mess up save files. So that's a shame, and hopefully they get it fixed very soon. But I don't know how serious the issue is. But it's just been
Well,
kind of a mess.
it sounds like you're already maybe considering just waiting for more of the DLC to drop. So just sounds like you kind
Yeah.
of already had a plan in place.
Yeah, that's true. It seems to be the better player because like from people who played that DLC, both friends and other people I've seen, like those DLC things, they actually add like story interactions into the main game as well. Like the characters that join your party, they actually have like something to say or contribute like in the main game when it comes to like facing off people or like certain like story interactions and whatnot. Like I wasn't expecting that. I thought they were gonna be like in their own isolated, closed off thing. So that's actually really cool to see that they actually have like a participation like in the main story as well. They're not just like siloed off.
I definitely do appreciate that implementation of DLC better rather than being like this is the DLC area of the game.
Yeah, yeah. So that caught me off guard, but that's really cool to see. But hopefully, when things are like in the clear, and maybe till I wait till like the second DLC pack, maybe I'll dive into that. Who knows? So for the thing that I wanted to bring here today was I got a key for the phase 3 of the closed beta test of Babylon's Fall. This is the upcoming game from Square Enix and Platinum Games, another collaboration project. Everyone loved NieR Automata, so why not get the names? The Square Enix and Platinum Games team again for it. Obviously, it doesn't involve Yoko Taro or Okabe or anything. It's not. They're not involved with this. This is the game where everyone was caught by surprise when at E3 2021 they announced that this is going to be a games as a service game, because that's been doing really really well for Square Enix lately. And yeah, I tried this with two other friends, and we played it for a little over like 2 hours. And this game needs a lot of work. This game needs a lot of work. So I wrote an article about it on the site, kind of breaking down, what to expect from the game, like what my experience was. When you start at the game, you have your whole typical character creator. You can pick from 1 to 3 races. At the closed beta test items, there's gonna be more. Um, and like these are they kind of have some flavor text for them. Like some are from residents from the sea, some are from the mountains, some dwell in the forests and whatnot. And they have like some flavor text of like what are their trades, what do they excel at in the world and whatnot. The main thing that separates them from what I tell is their Gideon Coffin ability. And the Gideon Coffin mechanic was something I was not able to test out in this closed beta test. I don't know if it's eventually unlocked like later on, or but it wasn't like available right away even after the first 3 stages. Like it seems to be some sort of ramp up. I don't know if any of that is in the closed beta test. The Gideon Coffin ability is, if you remember from like the early Babylon's Fall like footage and some of the gameplay, when we all thought this was still a single player cool thing, was when the player or the character like tethered towards an opponent, like that's like the Gideon Coffin ability for one of the races, and that's not something I was able to try out. And then the other two had like things where they're tethered to an opponent, they're either strengthen themselves or weaken them and whatnot. And then so you go through this character creator. this character creator, is your typical character creator, nothing special about it. The weird thing that stuck out to me, and like I guess throughout the whole game, was their brushwork filter graphic engine, which is I guess what they're trying to do is like it's sort of like not a faded out, like almost a cell shaded painter esque type of art style. It's supposed to be like even sharper in this closed beta because I guess in the past closed betas, it was very like soft and blurry. So it's sharpened up now, and it's still. I don't know. I don't know if I'm a big fan of the art style that they're going for here. Like it works, I guess.
I was going to
But
say, like the way you describe that, it sounds pleasant. Like, oh, I kind of like the painterly sort of art. But I remember watching the trailers and thinking this game was actually really ugly. So maybe it's just a really bad implementation.
Yeah, I don't know. Like it's just weird. But you get through that, and then after you do your character creator, you're kind of just placed into this like hub HQ. You're not really the only way you knew it was a HQ was like the 2-second tooltip that like popped up and said this is Sentinel HQ, and there's like no tutorials, nothing. You're just like, okay, I'm here. What do I do? Where do I go? So, like I said in my article, this HQ sort of serves as like the hub or village in a Monster Hunter game. It reminded me a lot of like Monster Hunter World, of that like kind of open like environment with all the planks and stuff, and you're by the sea. Um, and then so the main things that like you're given access to in the closed beta is obviously the mission board, um, where you can take up missions and whatnot. From there, you start a mission and people can join on you. You can access the shopkeeper where you can sell stuff, and then you can go to the person who gives daily quests. You do dailies, you get rewarded and whatnot. So, um, the so I was able to find out how to like join my friends. They like you have this headquarters ID that you input to join their instance, and then we all started a mission together. And the gameplay of this game is divided up into stages. It's these are very linear levels. They take maybe 10 minutes to complete, 10 to 15 at most. They're very point A to point B, like linear corridor type of stages. At least at the very beginning, I don't know if they ever open up. It doesn't seem like it. Um, where you run and then you go to this battle arena. You beat the enemies in there. Then that's done. You'll go on to the next corridor doorway. You go to another battle arena, and then so on until you get to like the final one, and then there'll be maybe a buff like boss type enemy, and you complete that, and you're done with the mission.
It seems very like arcadey or something.
Yeah, like it has like your after each battle you have like your rank like in something like in Bayonetta or other Platinum games. You'll have like bronze, silver, gold, platinum, pure platinum, and then it'll list off like how many dodges did you do, how many like aerial attacks did you do, and whatnot. Like your typical Platinum ranking system. Along the way, in between these battle zones, you have like environmental hazards. Like sometimes spikes will come out of the ground. Sometimes there'll be like a wall of shields that you just have to beat on until you can pass through it. And sometimes like for like the spikes, for example, sometimes you'll have like a tether point where you can like sling across them. Sometimes you have to like jump and dash across them. Sometimes like there'll be like a falling building, and you have to wait for that to finish before you can platform through that. So it's very standard in that way. Along the way, as you're beating up enemies and like looting chests, you'll get like these things called relics. And these relics are basically the equipment that you pick up, but you won't know what they are until they're appraised and identified after the mission is over. And then along the mission, you can't even like switch out your equipment. Whatever you have equipped on, you're locked into that. You can't do any sort of like inventory management until the very end of the mission or before you go into the mission.
So it's like picking a loadout, and then you're beholden to it.
Kinda, sorta, yeah. The battle system itself is this kind of like where it's neat on paper. I don't think it's executed very well. I think it has the potential to be like really cool, but it isn't at the moment. It has you can equip up to 4 weapons You can have, obviously your light and heavy attacks, and then you'll have these things called like spirit weapons. And you have like several weapon types in the beta that you get as drops. So you can have like a one-handed sword, a hammer, a shield, a bow, a wand, and whatnot. And these will do your standard stuff like for heavy and light attacks. Like the shield will just try to like parry attacks, but for everything else, it's your standard deal of like they'll have their own attack strings and whatnot. Um, when you equip them as spirit weapons, they have a similar functionality like one-handed swords. If you equip that to spirit weapon slot, you'll have like these obviously these phantom swords swing at them while you're attacking, and they come out and look cool and do a little bit more damage, but they're functionally still um, just what you would do with a one-handed sword. Um, with things like the shield, though, that gets really interesting, where the properties of it as a phantom or spirit weapon um, uh, drastically change, because you can have like a deployable shield around you as you're holding down the shield weapon, or the shield as a phantom weapon or spirit weapon. I always forget the terminology. So you're holding up the spirit shield, and then it has a barrier around you instead of like a parry and whatnot. And every time you use a phantom, or I keep saying phantom, spirit weapon, you consume like this red gauge underneath your HP bar. It's like the spirit weapon slot. I just call it MP because that's the easiest way to refer to it. And the thing that sucks about this is like the phantom spirit weapons are really like pretty like fun to use, but they deplete the MP gauge so fast. So after like 3 or 4 swings, let's say for the one-handed sword as a spirit weapon, um, it just depletes the gauge like immediately. And then how you have to uh, charge it back up is to repeatedly do like light weapon or light or heavy strings, and the properties of the weapons in those slots will determine your how much mana you regain to be able to use your spirit weapons again. So let's say like the standard one-handed sword light attack string, it'll charge it like here and there, but it's pretty poor at it. It's pretty slow. For something like the bow or the hammer, they'll charge it much faster. It's still like not as fast as you want it to be, but it still charges it faster. And these are all tied to like stats, like there's a specific like spirit siphon stat on your equipment that you have, and that seems to determine like how much spirit you gain back per attack or something. Um,
Is it the tuning of these mechanics that? So I'm what I was kind of waiting as you describe how the game works is for the other shoe to drop, because clearly you did not take well to this beta, and I'm trying to glean from your description here, like, okay, what about Josh is describing how this game works, but what about it is making it is contributing to your impressions? Or is it basically that these things charge too slowly, or you feel like you get stuck doing like these basic attacks to try to charge the siphon ability, or
Yeah,
like what?
it's like a copy. Like the flow of it is very off. Like when you go into this like game and you really want like some sick Platinum Games gameplay, like the pace of it feels too slow, and this is like a combination of like having to manage those like very limited resources that like at the moment like it didn't really come together all that well. Plus, like when it comes to enemy encounters, like enemies just do not stagger at all. They don't like react to your weapon hits unless it's like a very very big attack, like a charged weapon hammer attack that like takes a while to to get to that point. So like when you like do a combo with your one-handed sword, like the only thing they'll react to that is like the stab at the very end of it. But other than that, they're free to like attack you in the middle of that like a string, because they just don't react to it. There's like no stagger, no sort of like that's true for like most enemies in the game. Maybe for like the very very like small ones, maybe I couldn't really tell, but for most enemies that I encountered, they just were like, yeah, so what, you hit me, I don't care. And then like the enemies already felt like damage spongy on top of that. And you're already like trying to fight for like like your mana gain, because your dashes also consume mana. So if you're like doing stuff like in other Platinum games where you're trying to dash out of the way in the middle of like you see an oncoming enemy attack as you're attacking, like you now have to like sacrifice a little bit of mana to do a dash out of that as well. So you're just like constantly like in a fight for like trying to like do cool shit, but the game feels very restrictive in letting you do that. You know, there are times when like you can do like neat stuff, like but you have to really like exploit it for what it is. For example, like the hammer has decent mana regen on its light attack strings. So what I did for one of my builds was like, hey, I'm gonna have the shield up, the spirit shield up as I'm attacking with the hammer. So the hammer is basically just a battery for the shield as it's doing damage. Sure, it's kind of goofy. Sure, it's slow, but it's like I have good defense with the shield up as I'm doing hammer. Or what I did in another build was like, hey, the bow charges up mana pretty, a pretty decent clip. So I'll have that be the battery for the spirit hammer that I have. So my main DPS is the spirit hammer while I'm doing like a close up, like archer build while bonking enemies with this spirit hammer. Which that sounds cool on paper, but it just doesn't feel great like in action when you're taking into consideration like the slow pace of combat along with having to micromanage this mana meter on top of enemies being damage spongy and not really reacting to your attacks. And sure, you have your typical like Platinum games, like you can do air launchers to launch them up into the air and maybe keep them into the air and whatnot. But it doesn't. It's not as impactful as you would want it to be, like how in other Platinum games are, like Anarchy Reigns, like as I put into the article, like that had like a really satisfying oomph to like your attacks, and that this game doesn't have that at the moment. This is all on top of just general progression stuff as a games as a service thing. So when my friends and I were progressing through the first three stages, it's like, hey, this stage has like we recommend like item level 1, like a power score almost, or the next one like we recommend like item level 4, and then the third stage like item level 7. You're gradually progressing through them and like getting better equipment out of them, whether it's armor or new weapons to try out and whatnot. Then all of a sudden the game has like a weird power jump at the disclosed beta from the third to fourth stage. It's like I recommended item level 7 to item level 20 at the fourth stage, and like we're just using the gear that we got from like the third stage, which is like still around like item level 13 or 14, and then we go into this fourth stage and like nothing is taking damage. Like everything, like most of our hits is 1 damage, maybe the occasional 60, but that's still very small damage. And we're just trying to play the game normally at a normal progression, and it's like, oh, you're just hard locked at this. You can't progress through this stage. The game probably wants us to like go through an earlier stage and like grind through that, hoping for like better item drops, And there's already on top of like other things that like quality of life features that are missing that like other games as a service games have like fixed or recognized over the last decade. Like it's important to have like a compare equipment type of thing, which this game doesn't have. So like, oh, I wonder if this like sword is better than the sword that I have. Can I compare equipment? No, this is
I hate when that happens. Like, and does it have it at all? Like, even if you've got, do you have to equip both weapons to see it? Like, how do you compare equipment in the absence of the option to view it?
You just look at it. You just look at the weapon stats, and you just kind of look at like it'll show like the color coded like red means down, decrease, green means up. Like when you see like the stats, like not side to side, but like when you equip them on, it's like okay, and when you highlight over the other one, it's like okay. But like there's no like simple option at a glance to just see a compare equipment type of deal.
I don't think I've played an RPG in a while that's been very poor at this. But whenever you like you're at a shop in a generic game and you're looking at a new sword and you're like, is this sword better than my current sword? Like that game better have a comparison option to know exactly like, is it more crit chance or more whatever. So the absence of that is probably one of the most frustrating things, especially in any sort of game with gear. So I just think, oh man, like what a bummer. How did they miss this one?
Yeah, go for it. Ask.
This is a very weird comment. Well, not weird,
Uh-huh.
a very specific comparison. But you talked about how they going back a topic about the mana use when you dodge.
Mm-hmm.
So when I played Greedfall, which is a very different type of game, one
Yeah.
of the things that I actually thought was kind of interesting about it is that you can be a magic caster in that game, sort of. I believe you equip either rings or bracelets, I forget, and you kind of like fire projectiles out of your hands. And then whenever you're a magic class, you can do kind of like this evasive spin dodge that only the
Yeah.
magic class gets access to, and it doesn't cost any magic power, and it kind of breaks the game because you can just, whenever anyone's attacking you, you just press that button with good timing and you evade all damage. And I actually kind of said, I think in my review of that game, like if only this dodge had like maybe some sort of downside to it, like a mana cost. And I hear you're telling me that the mana cost of dodging in this game really feels to its detriment. So obviously the games are very different and they might be balanced differently. But I just thought that was, I'm just trying to think, like, what if that dodge, I'll ask you this. If you could dodge with no mana cost in Babylon's Fall,
Babylon's Fall.
do you think it would still feel well balanced, or do you think it would be broken? Does dodging give you invincibility frames?
It does give you invincibility frames, not a lot, and there's a perfect dodge as well. It would feel slightly better, but I think they need to do a lot of things. They need to like kind of speed up the game a little bit more and having hits feel more impactful. I think that's a good start for like taking this game in the right direction. Obviously, the whole games as a service progression thing is, hopefully by the final release that'll be better tuned up. Um, because right now, just combat just feels off. You also just have the, like little things like you can't sell equipment by batches or sell all at the shopkeeper. Like you have to do it one by one, selling the equipment at the shopkeeper one by one. But there is a sell all option at the um when you appraise all the relics that you get from a mission. There is a sell all button there after like you favorite the ones that you want to keep. Stuff like that, which is like weird. Um, it's kind of a weird oversight that hopefully they get around to. There's just it's like these little things that add up to something that just doesn't feel great to play. Um, and hopefully they get their there's no release date on this thing yet, but hopefully they get it together. Like it's been 3 closed betas, and this thing still isn't where it probably needs to be by launch. Like this thing will live and die by like first impressions. If you don't make a good first impression on this kind of game, I don't think you'll last long. And also, like I don't know I don't know what the price tag on this thing is. I don't know if this is gonna be free to play or not. It feels like it should be free to play, to be honest, because I don't see like how you can sell people if you're gonna sell this at a $60 standard $60. It's just like you got to be kidding me if you're gonna sell this at full price uh, for something that'll probably have microtransactions in it as well. You know, um,
I do definitely
and
agree with the comment about first impressions, where it's like there's nothing stopping them from tweaking the speed of combat, the balancing of your resources, of adding the quality of life in terms of gear, just management. But if it launches in a state where no one enjoys playing that, and then like let's say 8 months down the road they have this big patch 1.1 where they fix it all, then they kind of have to play catch up. Like, no, believe me, it's good now, and
yeah,
that's always a hard sell.
yeah. I mean, and it's just you would hope that at least if not, Square Enix like sees what happened to Avengers. It's like, well, maybe you know we should probably start taking things in the right direction before launch. But I don't know, man. What do I know? So it's just it. This just the title of my article says it all. This could very well be just the next games as a service blunder for Square Enix because this is. I, I'm just kind of. I don't know if baffled or shocked is the right question or not. The right mindset to have. It's just I kind of wish there was something more to this. I kind of wish it just felt better. Like I'd be more okay with it being as a games as a service game if it just played if it played well, if it played like if I had fun with it. And right now it didn't make a great first impression. I don't know if like it's something I want to touch on launch. Like to be honest, I don't know. They'd have to really make a compelling. They had to, the next time they show this game, it better be like a huge improvement.
Do we have a launch date?
I don't think so. I think it's still to next year maybe, but I'm not sure if they ever set a release date.
Let me check. Nope, to be announced.
Yeah. So.
Well, maybe it can stay in the oven for a bit and get into the place it needs to be before it launches, so we don't get another Avengers situation.
Yep. But yeah, that's all I really have to say about that. If you're interested to learn more of like the specifics and whatnot, I have an article up on the site, and hopefully that'll, if you're not sure what kind of game this is at the moment, hopefully that article shines some light on that.
Now, one game that released a few weeks back that we haven't had a chance to talk about, even though we talked about it pretty significantly leading up to its release, was Blue Reflection Second Light. So we had about a month's worth of podcasts where we talked about how this was tying into the initial game, to the anime, to the mobile tie-in, and all the characters that would kind of like cross-pollinate all the different avenues of the IP. But the game did release, and we haven't been able to really talk about it since, though we did mention we did put up a review for it, written by Chow here. So, Chow, I believe you and Josh were the only ones to play the original Blue Reflection, and you're the only one that has had a chance to play Second Light. So, now that you're available and we have a chance to talk about that game, just what was your takeaway from the sequel game?
The sequel game is basically they took everything from Atelier Ryza 2 and used those systems to incorporate in it to make it a better game. That's how
I'm actually like, I wasn't expecting you to be like that. That would be the initial thing that you would state outright.
Because they took the exact same combat system.
Well, okay. Well, the combat's great, so that actually makes me immediately want to play Blue Reflection Second Light. But first question then, I guess. Can you play this without having played the first?
Yes.
Can you play it without having watched the anime?
And that also as well.
What's the premise of this game?
Basically, you get isekai into some empty school, and the protagonist has her memory still, but the girls that was warped into this empty school doesn't have their memories. So, she's trying to get back home because, she's like wondering, oh my god, I have to do all my homework, I have to do all this, I had to get back home. Right, so she has like this goal, while all the other girls like, I don't know why I'm here. I don't have my memories. So that's kind of like the idea, right?
So the progression of the game is like just slowly getting back everyone's memories through whatever means.
Yeah, and usually trying to get back their memories, usually they had to go through like some kind of, some kind of hardship to go to like this hardscape where like it's like all their past comes to light, where it talks about all like the negative emotions that they go through. Like some of the characters, they worry about certain things. Like, one character used to go through a whole bullying experience, and she's just wondering that she never stood up for herself. That kind of idea, right? Mm-hmm. And trying to overcome these emotions in order to get their memories back.
So it sounds kind of like, is that the two story bits that you talked about so far is the character wanting to return to their own world because they have homework or whatever, and then like talking about like bullying and things like that. Is that kind of like the sort of themes that the game touches on?
It's sort of, but it's like different emotions for different characters, because there's more than one character joining you, and they all have their things, right? Like the original protagonist from the first game, Hinako, she wasn't really well explored in the first game, and you actually know more about her in this game than you playing the entire original Blue Reflection.
That's interesting, yeah, because like the thrust of like Hinako's arc in the first one is like, oh, she got this injury from I think she did gymnastics, right? In the
ballet. She's a ballet dancer. She got this injury, and now she can't do that ever again, right? You don't really explore that kind of idea in the original. It's just kind of like she's just kind of pessimistic towards like to her peers, but you don't really know much about her besides that, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, in this game you get to explore more about her, so you actually know her much better because all her life this is the only thing she knows how to do, and now it's like this is gone. It's like, what do I do?
Now, if you hadn't played the first game, would you like? Does Second Light kind of convey to the player that this was the original protagonist, or is that kind of unimportant at this point?
they don't actually tell you that. The only thing they would tell you is like, oh, I can use my powers here. It's like, I feel like this is familiar to me. And this is kind of like your connections, like, oh, maybe she belongs to a different medium, right? Like, if you get Hiyori from, I think that's from the anime. I think that's the character from the anime. And, she's like, oh, yeah, I think this feels familiar before. That's kind of like the clue that, oh, maybe they're from a different medium. Right?
But the game doesn't like expect you to have to know that.
Yeah, it's pretty self-contained, and I think that the reason why they teleport you to an empty school in this one is because they knew that the school that they created in the original game was like lifeless, like all the generic NPC doesn't do anything. So why not just bring everyone to empty school? It makes perfect sense.
Is that the whole game setting as an empty school?
Yeah, it's in an empty school, but there will be like these harpscape, which is like kind of like a imaginary place that they can go to that has their, or not imaginary place. It's kind of like a place that
it's like their mind palace, dude. Where
yeah. That's exactly it, Josh. But yeah, that's kind of like the second game in a nutshell. It's Atelier Rises 2 simplified without the alchemy from their game.
How far do they go with like the dating aspect? Because I know in the first one you could like develop relationships with other girls, but like it felt half-hearted and half-assed, and like they never really went all the way with like how they explored these relationships.
It's kind of the same idea, but it's a lot better. Like the dialogue here is a lot more improved, but you have to do it if you want to have like the best stats and the best the fragments. Because if you don't do these, you don't get the fragments in order to... Fragments are basically equipments, basically. You equip them, you get like passive stats boosts. And they also get talent points for doing these dating things. And talent points, you can learn new passive skills for your character. So it's not worth missing out these dating events.
So kind of walk me through a little of like how you initiate these dating things. Do you have to like develop like a relationship with them first, and then you have to go take them into battle to release their relation or anything like that?
No, you don't have to. It's basically if you have a new facility or anything if there's anything new.
So there's like base building in this game.
Pardon?
Is there like base building in this game when you're saying like about like a new facility?
Basically when you get further in the game, you can develop facilities, and each facility, has a function. It can improve someone's passive abilities. Okay. And it's also like a spot. Like, okay, I built a coffee shop, and this character likes making coffee in her original world. And so now it becomes a dating spot where they can talk about coffee with that character, right? In that spot. So it's basically the more facility you got, it's like the more characters can interact with as a dating spot. As long as there's a new dating spot, you can take the characters out on a date on that spot or something.
Is there can you two-time, or are you just dating everyone? Is there any penalty for like
no penalty?
Okay,
this entire relationship's what was that word? Starts with patriotic. I can't think.
Polkule?
Not that polkule. Patriotic, I guess that's the word.
Polygamy.
Platonic?
Yeah.
Sorry. Sorry.
English.
Yeah, it's a tough word.
There's a lot of words that deal with a relationship that start with the letter P.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. I was like, hold on.
So that's kind of the dating thing in a nutshell. You have to do it. You want the best stats for your characters, and if you missed out, then I think your characters are kind of gimped in combat, I think.
But there's like new stuff to this, like even beyond that, right? Like I remember, like in the like marketing, like you can like sneak through enemies now and like gain initiative and whatnot.
Yes, I hate this new mechanic. It's called the stealth mode.
Okay.
Basically, they got rid of the jump buttons when you're exploring in dungeons.
Have this whole jump button.
Yeah, you get this whole entire stealth mechanic thing that you can do, and there's certain parts in the game they force you to do this stealth thing where you have to like play like Metal Gear Solid with blue reflection in order to get to the next area. Obviously, there's no penalty if you get spotted. You just have to like run through the entire area again, but it's really annoying. I mean, it's kind of like, why even bother putting this in? I didn't sign up for Metal Gear Solid in my blue reflection.
It seems to be like a big improvement over the first game. I mean, the first game like was already like kind of sort of it was a flawed game for sure. But this seems to be like a big step up. It seems like from the
soundtrack is. Sorry, is the soundtrack is good?
Yeah, it's definitely good. I should post you the boss music, and you tell me what you think.
Yeah, that was the big like thing about the first game that people loved was the was the soundtrack. When people were like, well, the first game wasn't that good, but the UI and the soundtrack, great.
Yeah, maybe I could get James to play it. Definitely.
I just bought it and it's in my Steam account.
Dang, dude. You
What?
sold it.
Okay, it's that simple. Basically, you like NieR Rises 2's battle system, you can play this game for its combat. And
I feel like I have a weird obligation to eventually get to this game because I did watch all the anime. I'm like, you know what, the anime wasn't too bad. So
Have you played Rise of 2 yet, Josh?
I haven't. I need to get around to that also. Just another
Jeez,
game.
yeah, we don't have enough
games.
time. Yeah, Jesus Christ.
Yeah, but I really want to get around to it, but times are tough around here.
But yeah, it seems like
RPGs.
Blue Reflection Second Light is kind of a sleeper for the year, but like most of your impressions are pretty positive outside of apparently 4 stealth sections is still a thing. I thought we had moved beyond that, but apparently not.
people think it's hype still. Maybe they're still living 5 years ago.
Yeah, but no, it's because the first game I don't have firsthand experience with either game, but it wasn't received that well, and I guess I feel like the lead up into Second Light didn't have a lot of momentum behind it, but then all of your impressions are pretty positive. And we did talk about your review very briefly when you put it up a couple weeks back, or just over a week back, actually. So it seems like it was a surprisingly strong follow up to that game, which is always good to see rather than the alternative.
Yeah, because I don't think it's hard to surpass the original game, but it's like improvements can always be made if you take your feedback and use that to make a better idea, and if you get the opportunity to. Because a lot of games don't get the opportunity to make sequels where they could, make whatever ideas from they had originally better, right?
Right, and it seems like they just took all the feedback from the first game and used some smart implementation from like what you mentioned, like with the Rise of Battle system to create something that's just of a higher bar.
Yeah.
I guess the only thing now out of that, the whole Blue Reflection project thing, is like the upcoming mobile game that they have yet to really surface again, which is sort of weird because you have the protagonist of that unreleased mobile game so far in this game too.
I guess that's supposed to be Shion, right? Because I never played the mobile game, so I don't know.
No one has played the mobile game because it hasn't come out. So
Okay.
your guess is as good as anyone, to be honest.
Yeah, because Shion keeps saying it's like, oh yeah, you gotta play the mobile game, you gotta play this. It's like, no, you absolutely do not need to play anything else. The only thing that you probably are kind of confused about is maybe where these powers come from. That's about it, because they never explain about the Reflector's powers that much, except in the first game. That's the only thing that you'd probably be lost about.
They kind of
That
go
sounds
into
like a fairly major thing to be confused about, though.
Yeah, but they didn't even explain it that well in the original game.
Yeah, like it's basically it's magical girl bullshit. That's what it is summed up to. Like
that's like the only context you've been missing if you skip the first game. But I don't even think that was explained well in the first game as well.
It wasn't explained well in the first game. Like they sort of go into in the anime, but like not really that major extent. Like you'll have characters from like the first game, like I think it's like Yuzu and Lime show up in the anime.
Yeah, but they're kind of cryptic characters in this game. You don't know what they're doing. They just keep saying, "Oh, it's like you don't belong here." That's a secret for you to discover.
That's funny. Do you think they have a good shot of like having a third game in this series?
I think they do, but I don't know. We'll probably have to wait till NieR Rise of Free comes out. Who knows? Maybe they'll take some ideas from that and maybe use their battle system.
Yeah, I get some from Sophie 2 and some from Rise 3 and whatever, and Fairy Tail 2 when they announced that for sure.
So a couple of the features that are up on the site in the last couple of weeks, we've already talked about Josh's Babylon's Fall kind of preview article based on the closed beta. So if you want to see his thoughts out in written form, we do have that up on the site. Another feature that we put up on the site in the last week is that we were able to get some questions answered from the developers behind the upcoming remaster re-release of Monster Rancher 1 and 2 DX, which is coming to Switch on December 9th. So Monster Rancher is a game from the original PlayStation 1 where it would generate creatures based on which disc you slotted into the console, and which obviously can't happen here. So basically the the remaster will use a CD database instead. So it's kind of like more based on software algorithms rather than what CDs you have on hand. We were able to get some questions answered. So we kind of have like a FAQ back and forth interview sort of piece up on the site for the Monster Rancher 1 and 2 remaster. So wanted to give that a shout out because I know that we do have a couple people on site that are big fans of that series. It's its 25th anniversary next year. So it sounds like they're really kind of have like a renewed vigor for the series. It's always kind of, it released around the same time as like Pokemon and Digimon back in the late 90s, but never really saw that sense of popularity. But still trucking along. New game coming out in just a few weeks.
It was such a sick series back in the day, to be honest, because you'd have like nerds like buying like the latest like Nirvana album, for example, that like they didn't fucking listen to it, and you're like, I just want a monster from this. Like I heard from the online that like the Nirvana album that released like gave you like a pixie, and I want that. You know, it was so sick. It was so stupid. It was fun.
Yeah, so I don't know if the this new like CD database setup will have quite the same like unique magic to it, but
yeah, it's tough.
Yeah, but yeah, it's kind of a hard thing to emulate, but I'm sure, you know, obviously they still have a lot of passion behind the project. So it'll be interesting to see how well these are received when the remasters come out. But yeah, we do have that interview up on the site. We have quite a few news headlines this week, more than the last couple of weeks, but a lot of them are kind of like end of the year wrap up, early into next year detailing. So let's just kind of go through them. The biggest news of the week, at least the one that I put first on the list here, is involving our favorite game, our favorite upcoming game, other than maybe Elden Ring, and that is Stranger of Paradise: Final Fantasy Origin. It seems like this game has kind of endeared itself to us over the last few months, from its initial weird unveiling to all the details about it as we've been able to go hands-on and things like that. We finally learned about the cast last month, the whole. We learned about Neon, the fourth warrior of light. We learned about the princess and some of the settings. And basically, we got some more details coming out this week. They talked about the city of Provoca, which is a town from the original game that makes a reappearance in this reimagining. We get a new cast of characters, including their English and Japanese voice actors. An antagonist, Captain Bick.
Why did they get so hard on Bick? What the hell?
Is it Bick? Am I pronouncing that wrong?
Yeah, it's Bick. Or I think it's Bick. I'm pretty sure it's Bick.
What I should have done is I should have played the Pixel remaster of Final Fantasy 1 so that I had like a really solid foundation going into the reimagining of some of these characters and locations. But I haven't.
Vic was like the cowardly pirate that like opens up like that pathway, I think, in the waters.
It'll be interesting to see like how these characters are reimagined now that they have to have like, you know, full animations and full models and like a stronger appearance in the story and things like that. I do think some of the English voice talent is pretty good. Like the Queen is voiced by Mary McGlynn, who I grew up knowing as the voice of Makoto Kusanagi from Ghost in the Shell in the English version, at least. So and there's a few other like Fred Tatasciore, I hope we're not pronouncing that right, is the king. Obviously, we also know the Japanese cast as well. But some of the side characters have been detailed here about, you know, their interaction with the story and how they interface with the. Oops, sorry if you heard my dog in the background there. How they interface with the four warriors of light. So we have up all the details on the site. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, at least they don't have Bryce Peppenbrook.
Yeah, no Bryce Peppenbrook, so nothing to complain about here on an English front. But
yeah, this game is I'm really looking forward to it. This game looks so sick.
Yeah, they do give a little bit of detail about some of the battle systems, mainly the break gauge that both the enemies and Jack will have, as well as the soul shield mechanic, which allows you to basically reflect enemy abilities back at them. So I don't know if those were present in the current.
They were.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So now we just got them detailed in text form.
So, I'm just gonna interrupt. Is this kind of like a reverting of the stagger system from 13 or from 7 remake? This break system.
Sorta like it, but in a more action context, right? So you're more proactive about it, and you can dictate it more easily. So like it is sort of like the stagger system FF13 vaguely. It basically gives you openings to like do like maybe an instant kill or whatnot in this one.
Dang.
Yeah.
Well, which is something that you've seen kind of from these 3D action RPGs, also with like stamina gauges or block gauges or poise or whatever you want to call it. Just like their take on that kind of well-worn mechanic. So
Yeah.
don't fix what ain't broken, I suppose.
Yeah, the real unique thing is the soul shield here, because you can basically just absorb attacks and then fling it back at enemies. So like the Garland boss fight, for example, like you want to like absorb like certain attack, a fire attack, and then fire it out, and he's doing like an ice thing or something, you know. So it's a system that like you get a better understanding about like the enemy behavior patterns and attack cycles because you engage with that system.
Yeah, and there's apparently the UI is very clean, where certain abilities that are designated in like a purple text are the ones that can be soul shielded.
Yes.
So I do kind of like that it's very clean, where it's like we're letting you know that you have this option here for this specific ability to use this reflect mechanic here.
Mm-hmm.
I see.
That'll be a late March release, March 22nd, I believe. Sorry, March 18th. So in the very tail end of that Q1 window, that'll be packed.
March 18.
Yep. Certain people might find this interesting. Certain people might find this absolutely pointless. But we did learn who the nominees were for the Game Awards coming up, obviously, later this year. And obviously, in our site, we're interested about what the RPG candidates were. So it seems like that there are 5 games up for nomination for the Game Awards RPG of the Year, and that is Cyberpunk 2077. Again, it fell outside of the window last year. Monster Hunter Rise. Yes, Monster Hunter's in the RPG category. Deal with it, I suppose.
There you go. There you go. The Game Awards said so. So no one will like bitch at us anymore for Monster Hunter.
Capcom says so. Now the Game Awards says so.
Yep.
So
they're yep. Go for it.
Scarlet Nexus, which I think is kind of a surprising addition, but cool to see. Shin Megami Tensei 5 and Tales of Arise. So I guess I don't want to drill too much into this, because obviously this is just one of many award shows. Like, we're going to have our own, obviously. There's like the Golden Joysticks, there's BAFTA and things like that. But this is kind of like the most like pop culture blockbuster sort of one, because obviously it's paired with a bunch of the game announcements and things like that.
Let's go Cyberpunk.
Yeah, do we think there are any omissions from the RPG category that really should be here?
There's all the RPGs that mattered.
Just Cyberpunk, okay?
I don't know. We could look at our master list for a game of the year. And say, I don't know. What's really this here?
We'll get the Grand Theft Auto remaster. Maybe that's an RPG in some ways.
I mean, of course, there's a shitload of like omissions here that we would like to see. Like, I don't know why Cyberpunk is here. To be honest, I get it, because it's like it's a popularity contest. I mean, if Keanu Reeves was to pick one of these, we know which one he would pick, and then we're following Keanu Reeves, so Cyberpunk's gonna win.
No, so obviously Cyberpunk was eligible but it feels like it's kind of like taking up a spot just because of recognition of how much hype it had going into the game that completely fizzled out once it released. So I do agree that seems like a weird omission. In some of the other categories, I did see a lot of people voicing frustration about the omission of Forza from some of the other general categories.
I feel like y'all are ignoring like the elephant in the room for the RPG that got snubbed from the nominations here.
What is
NieR
that?
The World Ends With You.
Oh yeah, I was actually thinking
it's already on
maybe...
sale on early Black Fridays, so I guess everyone forgot about that.
Like I said, there are many like RPGs that deserve a slot here, and that's just one of many, right? So it is what it is. The Game Awards are going to be the Game Awards. I mean, we have other RPG representations in other categories too. Like they have the NieR Replicant re-release and Best Score and whatnot.
Yeah, you might argue that as another snub is NieR Replicant, even though you could say, oh, it's a remaster, but still.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying I really like the work that Okabe put into remastering the whole entire original NieR thing, and it's obviously orchestrated live instruments and whatnot. But a certain part of me is like the first time I heard those tracks were from the original, so I sort of
Yeah.
I sort of have a bias, or more I like the originals better. Not to say that the remaster was bad. I just like the originals better, and I wish there was a toggle option.
Same.
Wow,
Yeah.
there is a way you can do that. You can just get NieR
On
Gestalt
PC.
on the backwards capable Xbox playing Gestalt.
I mean, I can just rip my NieR PS3 game and put it on an emulator, and there you go as well.
It emulates really well in RPCS3.
See? So
I will
mean,
say though that I am kind of pleased to see Scarlet Nexus here, because I feel like Scarlet Nexus kind of had a lukewarm reception, but I kind of took to it pretty, like, I think better than the consensus. I'm like, all right, that's kind of cool to see here. I don't think it should win, but I think it's cool to see it nominated.
do you want to buy my deep dark secret of the year? That's like probably a hot take to a lot of people.
What is that?
I like Scarlet Nexus more than Tales of Arise.
I think I did too.
All right.
Whoa.
I
Well,
don't want to just latch
a
on
little
to your
comrade
opinion,
game of
but
the year. Here we go.
I feel
I
like
probably get shot for saying this, but I like Tales of Berseria more than Persona 5. Well, there you go.
well, I think we're talking about the here and now, Chow. We're talking about 2021 releases.
Yeah, but I'm
You know,
saying
back
that
in the
was
day.
that was back in my day.
Oh, yeah, well, child, back in the day, I prefer the Dreamcast over the N64.
Back in the halcyon days of 2016 or whatever. But no, all right. So those are the nominations. It'll be interesting just to kind of keep tracks on what the Game Awards, what the big popularity contest decides who wins. But hey, they've had some kind of enlightened picks before, like when they picked Sekiro as the winner a few years back. So maybe they'll surprise us.
They actually have Temptation on there, though.
Is From Software really that like niche these days, though?
That's a good point. Yeah, it's kind of like
so.
it's kind of like the safe out there pick or whatever.
Yeah, the From Software is not really niche anymore for sure. They've I don't know if they're like obviously not as well known as like something like Square Enix and Final Fantasy, obviously, but I think they're like A or double A for whatever that means recognitions. They're definitely not niche anymore, which is why we're never getting another Armored Core.
Oh, wait a second. Hasn't Final Fantasy 15 like almost crossed 10 million? I'm pretty sure Dark Souls 3 has sold more.
I have no idea.
Let me double check because
that'd be cool then, I guess. I don't know. I don't keep up with
Dark Souls 3 has sold over 10 million units as of May 2020.
Wow.
So yeah, Dark Souls, at least right now, is bigger than Final Fantasy.
Dang.
More like they should just make a good Final Fantasy game. Am I right?
Spitting truth there, Joe. Final Fantasy 15 had its moments, okay? A few of them. This isn't quite an announcement, and I don't think it surprises us, but we did get kind of like a little bit of insight about what Ryu Ga Gotoku, I can't ever say that, damn it, RGG Studios.
Ryu Ga Gotoku.
Thank you. RGG Studios, the team behind the Yakuza and Judgment series. We got a little bit of insight from the latest issue of Famitsu. Obviously, we did learn about the departure of Nagoshi about a month back, and now the studio is helmed by Masayoshi Yokoyama. So he discussed a little bit about the studio's current outlook and what their current projects are in Famitsu magazine. They did talk about and confirm that, yes, Yakuza 8 is in development. Of course, what we got over here in the West as Yakuza Like a Dragon. And kind of predicted, but some confirmation that it will be an Ichiban Kasuga story. He will be the main character. It'll be set, they say, several years after the story of Like a Dragon. So I don't know how long several is, but kind of the expected roadmap that I think people kind of want to see after it seems like people took to Like a Dragon to Ichiban pretty strongly. So that is in the works.
Here's a secret. The nice thing about the Yakuza series is all their entries. You just have to think about like the year the original Japanese release was, and that's the year the story was set in.
Oh, I kind of knew that they had like obviously the yearly progression, but I didn't know if it was tethered so strongly to the release year, but I guess it is.
Yeah.
All right.
That's the reason why there are multiple Yakuzas that take place around Christmas time, because that's when the game released around there.
Huh. But they also do mention that the Judgment series is still very important to them, and unannounced titles in both the Yakuza and Judgment series are in the works. I don't know, like technically Yakuza 8 is not announced. Well, I guess technically, if they say that Yakuza 8 tentative title will be a sequel, is that announced? Is that not
if they
announced?
announced it? I mean, of course they were working on new Yakuza, but yeah, I mean that's known. That's cool. That's exciting. The translation says the Judgment series is also very important to us. I don't know what the fuck that means, because like, does that mean you're gonna make a new one eventually, or it's not? It's nice saying that it's very important to you, but man, after all those rumors coming out about like the talent agency and whatnot, I'm like Komura's talent agency. I'm like,
yeah. Well, it's good to see that hasn't basically put a bullet in the series. So.
Well, if Judgment continues to be made with the same protagonist, at least I can play it on my new Xbox Series X.
Yeah, I guess that's the thing, right? If they announce a new Judgment and we still have the same protagonist, then I guess that series is okay to live for now. That's gonna be the weird like deciding factor. Like, hopefully, I would love to believe that like that this means that there will be another Judgment game. I really hope so. I think the more exciting thing to me is that they're actually making a game that's not part of Yakuza and Judgment. Because the last time they did that was like, I don't know, Binary Domain.
Yeah, probably.
Like, and
the translation
that's not fun.
The translation from Gamatsu says, we'll actively challenge ourselves to create new titles, not only for Judgment, as circumstances permit. So it seems like they have aspirations outside those two series.
I guess you can. I don't know if you can count the Virtua Fighter 5 Final Showdown, because that is built on their engine, and they did work on that as well. So I don't know.
What about Super Monkey Ball, guys? Super Monkey Ball?
Did they work on that?
Oh no, I just remember something about Nagoshi being rare.
No, RGG Studios did do the new Super Monkey Ball.
Yeah, I was like, wait, did they do that too? That's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense because like RGG Studios used to be Amusement Vision, so it's like they are the original Monkey Ball studio.
Yeah, Nagoshi was the Monkey Ball dude. That is right. So yeah, I mean, I really want to see what like I wanted to see make a brand new thing that's not tied to any IP there.
We kind of have two news bits here that are a little bit out of the normal things that we cover, but they're kind of interesting tidbits to kind of discuss for at least a short while. The YouTube channel, what's it called? Kamiya Chronicles from Cutscenes. So I don't know much about this channel, but they've been running a series of videos over the last month, basically about Hideki Kamiya, obviously a executive figure over at Platinum Games who has had his hands in many titles over the past 20 years, 15 years. And one of those titles infamously is Scalebound, which was announced originally as an Xbox title but then canceled back in 2015. And it's there's been rumors about whether it was, remember when there was a rumor that it was picked up by Nintendo, and a lot of weird stuff that people were kind of like bargaining that how Scalebound might actually somehow still exist. But we got some word from Kamiya himself in this recent interview where he basically reflected on kind of like a post-mortem about Scalebound and about how the struggles that Platinum Games came up with in terms of why it couldn't end up matching up to he wanted to make a photorealistic game, Kamiya did. He wanted to make an online game, but the studio did not have experience with that. They did not have experience with the Unreal Engine. Their ambition kind of outstretched their capability, at least at the time. So it was almost kind of like an apology to Microsoft about not being able to have the project come to fruition. So it's kind of a very like cool, sort of open and earnest and honest reflection on that whole saga, and kind of almost putting like a bookend on it because it never really kind of got one of those.
It feels oddly like timely to hear about issues with Platinum trying to deal with an online game with the whole Babylon's Fall stuff going on.
Yeah, it's a weird thing. I mean, it's a tough situation because Platinum Games, they do produce good stuff, but they sort of have this weird reputation of having a very they often get into trouble development more often than not. When you saw them in that weird having to be a mercenary group and doing licensed IPs like for TMNT and Legend of Korra and whatnot, that phase, and then more recently when they had a fallout with Cygames about Granblue Fantasy Relink and them being taken off that project, and then they also had like another um the I think they had a mobile game with side games called Lost Order, I think, and that was canned um, silently. Then you have their things like with World of Demons, which was touted to be a mobile game at first, but then that got moved to Apple TV, and then now you have this
Well, I mean,
delay.
World of Demons is also on iOS. It's less that it became an Apple TV game and more like pretty much any Apple TV game is a port of a mobile game.
I mean that never released as a mobile game. That's the thing. It was touted to outlets for preview as a mobile game, but then after those initial previews about what the game was, we didn't hear from that game for years until they said, "Oh, there's an Apple TV game now." But there in the UI and the way the game plays, it was clearly supposed to be a mobile gotcha game at first. Then you have these things now with Soul Cresta being delayed to an indefinite date, even though it's so close to release. It's Platinum Games. Once again, they make really cool stuff. I really like Mad Roll. I really like Anarchy Reigns. I really like NieR Automata, and all sorts of other stuff from them. But it's tough. It's tough to see them consistently go through like development struggles and hardships, and like they feel so unstable. More often than not, and it really sucked when Scalebound got canceled. And I like the team there. I like Tamura. I really like Kamiya. They're very open and honest when they're allowed to be, during interviews and behind the scenes and stuff, and seeing their development processes. But it's just I don't know what. There's just something about the way things are. Not necessarily by them, maybe higher ups, but like
the company's mismanaged.
Yeah,
I it's not just their game development. Like, speaking as someone that was very excited for the Wonderful 101 remastered Kickstarter and actually pledged in for it, the way that they treated that Kickstarter, any of the issues whatsoever, the lack of communication, the lack of outright working with people that had issues from start to finish. There's even now there's people that still have issues with it. Like there was a whole like problem where it's like any backers in like Europe, they were worried about having to pay like customs fees or something when it was supposed to be handled on their end, and then there was stuff like that. With my circumstances, they advertised the PC release as an actual physical release because like the preview image they had said PC DVD, and then they later said, oh, it's a Steam key. And then once they announced, oh, we're just going to give Steam keys to everyone because of the delay, I was like, well, what the hell? And I tried to get it switched to a Switch physical, but they were so... I shouldn't say this, but I will say this. In another server I'm in, there's a dude from the Yeti there, and he even outright mentioned that it was pain trying to get them to communicate even with their own business partner through the Yeti, because they were the ones doing, like the Yeti were the ones doing all of the actual distribution of the physical copies of the games and all of the backer rewards that weren't just games. Which makes sense because they're a relatively large company in that sort of space. It makes sense that Platinum would work with them. But Platinum was basically throwing them under the bus, wasn't actually communicating with either their customers or the Yeti. And by the time they actually got back to them, at least in my case, they weren't able to do anything about like swapping the PC physical to a Switch physical, even though if they had enough time to contact... Well, if Platinum had actually gotten back to them in time, they would have been able to do something. But they spent so long just basically completely ignoring their calls for basically every issue that people had, that by the time they finally got back to them, it was too late. And it's just, looking at how mismanaged their actual games are recently, and then looking at how, like, even just a glimpse behind the curtain with the Kickstarter situation, it's like, I used to be a huge Platinum fan. I love their games. I played pretty much anything that they came out with, like sight unseen. But even before Babylon's Fall got revealed, I've been really, really worried about that company since that experience. Because that is not an experience that you would expect from a company that's being managed correctly.
Yeah,
What does Platinum have in the works other than Babylon's Fall?
Bayonetta 3.
Oh, right.
Yeah. And some of the things that like you've been speaking about, like in terms of like communication issues, that's part of the Kamiya's apology, like, in terms of like trying to communicate between Microsoft and having, translating between Japanese and English and try to convey, ideas and goals and whatnot on that development through that language barrier. Like this just seems to be like an ongoing issue for them when it comes to like the global audience and global matters and whatnot. It's just the like even to this day, I feel like the communication breakdown it's still a mess. It seems like those pipelines are still not in place. They're still unstable. It's still very like God knows what's happening but in the development of Babylon's Fall.
Well, they haven't committed to a release date, as we've discussed, so hopefully they can take their feedback from these betas and hopefully with Bayonetta 3 and a surprising release for Babylon's Fall, maybe it can surprise us in a good way. So
yeah, hopefully,
Here's kind of a surprise update, and this is not one that I was aware of until about an hour ago, and that is that we got a new free content pack released for Outriders, which I feel like we discussed. We had quite a bit of opportunity to discuss Outriders earlier this year because both James and Josh played a significant amount of it, and last week the New Horizon update launched for free. And then alongside the announcement of a Worldslayers expansion in 2022. And I did also see that the player count for this game did spike with the launch of the free New Horizon update. So I will ask the necessary question is that have either of you had any interest in checking this out in Outriders?
Not only no, but hell no.
Wow.
I mean, in my eyes, I'm done with that game. I've completed all this whole story and did the expeditions and whatnot. I know with the New Horizon update, they added 4 new expeditions and they have a transmog system, rebalanced the classes, removed the timers for expeditions. It's just that they like I don't really have like a strong like I would need like a whole bunch of friends who I played like who were into it to like drag me back in and then try and then play it again with them. I don't know if we're gonna do like the Worldslayer expansion either. Like it's just one of those. It's like I had my fun with it. I poured like it's not a bad game. Like I had my.
Oh yeah, don't get
at
me
least 50
wrong.
hours into it. Like I put 50 hours into it at least.
It's not a bad game. I just feel like, and this feels kind of mean to say, it was the game that everyone played during a dry period where a bunch of people that had next gen consoles desperately wanted something to play on them, and it was like one of the first early next gen games. And since it had crossplay and was co-op, and it released during a bit of a dry period, people were just like, okay, I'll play Outriders.
Yeah, I mean that's you hit the nail on the head. The unfortunate part was it took months for them to like iron out multiplayer issues, crossplay issues. I don't even know if it's like absolutely all fixed to this day. I have no idea, but it took a lot of time for them to like iron out technical issues in that game.
I see Square Enix like a month or so ago saying, "Oh, we foresee Outriders to become a huge franchise for us," and I'm like, buddy, no. Outriders 2 is not going to do nearly as well as the first one.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to it because I like the people can fly devs. And it was fun. I'm not sure if it would do as successful as this game because of the time and place. But if they did it Outriders 2 and like they improve a lot on it, like I'd be down. Sure, why not? I didn't hate it.
But apparently, though, like I'm looking at some Steam charts just to kind of get a kind of a high level overview of how it's doing. But Outriders has more players right now, just under 10,000 than it's had since like April or at least May. So apparently, some people at least are willing to try this out, and maybe the announcement of an expansion also coming next year will mean that people will stick around. Because my understanding is that before this free update was announced, there wasn't any known roadmap or pipeline, and this was kind of like out of nowhere.
It's in a live service game.
This was never pitched as a games as a service game. This was never pitched as that. They were always like, if people want more content after release, we'll make it. But it's never like, hey, these are do your dailies, do your weeklies. This was never that type of game. This was a game that had like a definite start and definite end to it.
Yeah, so now it's got just the announcement of an expansion on the way. So we'll see if that keeps people around or if it will just kind of plateau. It looks like it plateaued right around like 1,000 concurrent players for the last several months, about 10 times that now. So I guess at least it seems like it's successful on release. I don't know if it's been out long enough to know how it's been received. Doesn't seem like we'll get firsthand impressions on those, but it'll be interesting to see like how it all carries forward into the expansion release next year. We did get some smaller news here. This is one that I am not well versed on. We got some new teaser for an upcoming compile heart game featuring characters from the Hyperdimension Neptunia series, even though I don't know if we know if it's in that series, because they play a lot with crossovers and cameos and things like that. So I don't... Go ahead.
So
let's ask our resident Hyperdimension Neptunia expert, Hyperdimension Kieran.
Chow? Is that you?
What?
No, but I did buy a new CPU. Does that count?
No. So the teaser that went up for this was the new Neptunia game that they're eventually gonna announce soon is for the sisters of the main characters. So Uni was the sister of Noir. Nepgear was the sister of Neptune. The Xbox One didn't have a sister, and then there's two sisters for Blanc, which are Ram and Rom, I think. And it's gonna be funny because I have this weird. I'm thinking this is gonna be an updated re-release of Hyperdimension Neptunium Mark II, which is because that game was the sisters were the main characters. That was the first time they debuted in the series. So I'm wondering if they're gearing up for like teasing an announcement of like a updated re-release of that game. Because Neptune, if there's one thing that the Neptunia series loves these days, is re-releasing old games that they already released. So I'm like, I don't know if it's a new game with the sisters. I'm like, okay, we'll see if it's not ass. But I'm thinking it's just a re-release of an old game, like the usual. But that's just me.
So basically, you just don't think that this is going to be like the precedent isn't there for them to announce a new game other than that crossover with the.
Well, I'm just going from the track record. They usually release a lot of these remasters and remakes quite often, so don't expect anything new.
Yeah, like until proven wrong, I'm thinking it's just to be a re-release of an old game. Because that seems like the current trend.
That's their MO.
Yep. I mean, they fucking... What was that PS5 release? It was like a re-release of like a remake.
I got this.
Oh,
so
boy.
Basically, there was the enhanced re-release / remake on Vita of the original PS3 version. So that was the first re-release. Then that got ported to PC. Then that got ported to PS4 in Japan. And then that got ported to PS5.
So there you go. No, say what he said backwards.
It's easy to remember if you think about the fact that the go in its name is also standing for the fact it's the fifth re-release or the fifth release.
Yep. Yeah.
Well, the tease is for an announcement coming November 25th in, I believe, the Famitsu magazine. So maybe we'll know. Well, no, we should know by next week what this was. So stay tuned. Check back with us.
Yeah.
Maybe they get more ports in Skyrim.
Don't say that. I don't want to look into that.
We did get a new trailer for Elex II, which we also got the release date not so long ago, for March 1st next year, how it's going to be like in the wake of Elden Ring. We talked about this at last podcast or maybe the podcast before. I kind of poo-pooed on it, basically saying that we haven't seen enough of the game, that it's basically barely been marketed and they haven't shown much at all that was really enticing or compelling. They did show a trailer showing the game's 5 playable factions. The original game had 3 that you could ally with anyway. And I thought that part of the game was actually its strength, how it actually like really, I'm talking about the original game here, how which faction you end up allying with really changed like the destination of the story and what sort of character you would end up playing. So to have an early trailer focusing on that aspect of the game for Elex 2, I think is a smart move. And over the course of this trailer showing the 5 factions, it's actually like the first real extended look at just the game itself, not a CG render, not just marketing like the different editions of the game, but actually showing gameplay. So I kind of appreciate that, for like the first gameplay trailer is focused on the strength of the original game. It's still not a looker like visually, technically, but I do think that it's the best look that the game has had so far. So it's still got a kind of a, you know, an unceremonious release date, being in the wake of so many big titles early in Q1 next year. But this is the first trailer that I've seen for this game that I don't immediately like cringe or scoff at. Like, all right, I could see this. I see what it's doing. It looks nice in spades, in spots. I mean, so we got a new trailer up on the site that kind of goes over the factions. It has the 3 original factions from the first game: the Berserkers, the Outlaws, and the Clerics. It also adds the Albs, who were the antagonists in the first game, as well as a new faction called the Morcons, who basically are survivors that used to live underground and are basically, they were isolationists and now are starting to try to spread into the other regions of the world. So it's the first time I've looked at Elex 2 and not immediately like been dreading it, I suppose. So, so that's good.
The promotional marketing for this game has been an odd one, or continues to be an odd one.
Yeah, it still looks like a late generation PS3, early generation PS4 game. It's not a looker. The environments are kind of drab. The colors are kind of flat, but neither was the first game, and that's not really what I was looking for here. So hopefully just the gameplay and like the interaction between these different factions ends up being the strength, which I'm not going to say I expect will be that, but I expect that if this game has like a singular highlight, that it will be that. But
yeah, because that was like the first game's like highlight, right? Like, all the faction interaction.
At a high level, there's been so many games that have like, I'm thinking like Fallout games or whatever, or Bethesda games in general, where they have like factions, but you can kind of just play all sides until the very end. It doesn't end up really mattering. Or in Elex, if you like ended up being sympathetic towards one group of people, it would like lock you out of being able to do certain things with other factions. Like these choices mattered, and it's kind of frustrating in a way, but it actually kind of is rewarding in other ways, where it's like, oh, this is something that I'm experiencing because of the decisions I made, rather than everything just being like, here's the tech area flavored region of the game because these people are technologists, or here's the Berserkers, I believe, are kind of like very shamanistic and spiritual, and it's like, oh, they're that's what they get, and that's that flavor of the game. But you can just kind of play all sides and exhaust all of it and see everything if you want. Elex didn't really work like that. It actually meant
on Elex, you have role play commitment.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Commitment. So hopefully Elex 2 does that as well to the same extent as Elex 1. March 1st, the week after Elden Ring. I don't know why I feel like I have to keep bringing that up.
Yeah, that's just our radar draw 2020. It's like, how many days away is it from Elden Ring? Is it pre-Elden Ring or post-Elden Ring?
Oh yeah,
the 2 eras of our time.
PER and post-ER. No, before Elden Ring, BER and post-Elden Ring. Coming next month, we do have Granblue Fantasy Fes, which is basically for our site kind of like the yearly check-in for Granblue Fantasy Relink, which we tend to get like incremental bit pieces of news for that game. And we got dates for this year. So Granblue Fantasy Fest 2021 will run from December 11th to December 12th. Specifically on the 12th, we will get an inside look at Granblue Fantasy Relink. We don't know exactly what yet and exactly how much they'll show. It's usually been kind of incremental stuff each year. I know a lot of people have been really hyped for this game, and it's obviously been kind of long in the tooth in terms of its development cycle. So don't know if we'll see significantly more than we saw last year, but it is on the itinerary, and obviously we will report on it based on
it be on the itinerary as like having like an actual segment along with Granblue Versus, which is the fighting game. Like at least it's actually looking good. It feels like it's gonna be more than just like a teaser and like a small gameplay thing. Hopefully, this has to be the year that they give a release date. This has to be the year. This is gonna be crazy if there's not gonna be a release date.
All right, yeah,
So,
I'm trying to go back to see what we saw last year. So late last year, so we got a pretty beefy trailer in 2019, and then we didn't hear again until December 2020, where we heard plans for a 2022 release date, as well as about 20 minutes of gameplay footage. This was what's the heroine's name?
Cheetah.
Oh yeah, so it showed some gameplay with her leading a party like on an airship,
Yeah.
and then basically that's last we've heard of it, and we're gonna get hopefully a similar at least length of gameplay footage this year. But it does share its time slot with Versus, so I don't know if that's auspicious or not. But
Versus is a weird one because I forgot if they're Child. You remember if they're like done with their current season pass in Versus?
I don't think so.
Do they have one more character in it?
I think Vera might be the last thing.
Oh yeah, they did confirm Vera as the upcoming one. I don't know if she was the last reveal or not.
Yeah, but I think she's playable now. Nobody talks about it. It's like the whole fighting game is dead because the netcode was garbage.
Wait, is Vera already out for it? I thought she was just announced.
They did show clips of her though.
Oh, okay, but has she actually been released though, or not?
That I have no idea. I dropped the
Okay.
game before season 2 launched because I just hated the netcode. I couldn't stand waiting
Dude,
for
no,
like 5 minutes. For
like even beyond the netcode, the state of that game is dire because like they just like nerf all the fun stuff out. Last I heard, like they just made a lot of weird balance changes that doesn't make the game fun.
yeah,
Yeah.
every patch just made the game worse because they want to balance games.
Vera does not join until December.
There you go.
Oof.
Yeah.
So I wonder if that's basically what this will talk about.
It could be the last season pass. Who knows? Like even like they cheaped out on like giving like mobile stuff too. Because usually back in the old days, it's you buy that character, you get also cool skins for the mobile game. Now you don't even get that anymore. Now it's just like some SSR ticket that you might not even get a good character.
Yeah, that game like I don't like the only thing you can like say for that game like in Versus is like we're gonna have if they announce rollback netcode and like a major balance patch to like make the game fun again. I think that's the only way you kind of get players back to it. I don't know if it's a little too late though.
I think it's too late. They would have to sell like a sequel or something like that.
And Arx is just like very busy now with Strive content and the DFO fighting game. But yeah, but I imagine the Versus thing has to be small compared to Relink for this block. I would hope, but they have 40 minutes to make something happen in this segment. Hopefully they give a release date, and hopefully the game is fun. That's all you can really hope at this point.
Even the mobile game's kind of dire right now. I haven't seen like any significant update in the mobile game.
Yeah, all my friends are just like whatever to the mobile game right now. It feels like this is like a really bad year for Granblue.
It's like ever since COVID, the game barely updated. I'm not sure you're straight of the game not having any updates, or they just basically bring all their staff to Uma Musume. That's what I'm thinking, because that game is the most successful franchise they have right now, so they probably don't even care about Granblue anymore.
Yeah, I'm thinking of the other side games like Precon is still coasting. Uma Musume is doing gangbusters. I don't know how other Dragalia is still alive, I guess, technically.
But yeah, game's in a dire state. Like I don't know. It's like I just wish they'd do something about it.
Well, maybe you'll get your wish in a month or less than a month, December 11th and 12th.
Yeah, you can give us all the beefy details on whether they decided to revive the game or not.
Yeah.
I'm only gonna care about the Relink stuff and And
Yeah.
I'll be honest, every time they've shown Relink lately, it's been looking worse and worse to me.
I think that's from dropping Platinum Games, but I hear like strange rumors. Like people said that they dropped them because apparently they charge too much and they want something a little bit cheaper, so they try to do everything in house or something like that. That's the rumors I heard from people, but you never know because
Well, I've also heard people bargaining, saying, "Well, Platinum Games finished what they were contracted to do, so it was just that was the end of their working relationship. It wasn't. It was less of a canceling and more that they finished what they were doing, which I don't know. Like,
Like I don't really buy that because even if they finish what they did, you don't fucking delist them from the main staff credits from your site and any like future promotional stuff.
that is a bit of a weird.
And build a new studio. Build a new studio to make that game from the ground up again. You know,
Yeah.
you don't fucking do that if that's the only like they finished their part of it. You don't fucking do that.
Yeah.
it's really iffy. It's like all those, it's like those employees that leave from certain companies. They said they left on a good terms. Like obviously they didn't leave on a good terms.
Yeah, it's just like something happened behind the scenes, and hopefully one day someone will shine a light on it. I mean, it'd be a fascinating story. Like it's not just like I like. Just to be clear, I never want these theories to like come to light just to see who to point the finger to. It's not about that. It's about like just seeing how the industry behind the scenes, just to like for my own fascination and curiosity. It's not to lay blame on anyone or anything. Same with the Scalebound thing. It's not to lay blame anyone or anything. It's just a fascinating thing, like an insight onto what happened.
Yeah. Speaking of side games, we did also. I don't want to oversell this because I've seen headlines kind of overselling this. We finally got another look at Project Awakening, which was a side games project that was announced several years ago, and we haven't seen for like 3 years. I think all we've seen is like the original footage of the armored soldier fighting like a T-Rex in an arena of some sort.
Yeah.
During the side games tech conference, they did show a very small tidbit of basically just reminding us that Project Awakening still exists and is ostensibly still being worked on. This footage is basically just a panning shot of a woodland environment for about a minute, going back to the same like character from before, as far as I can tell, looking over like a valley. And
Yeah,
that's
it's just
kind
a
of
graphic tech demo thing of that, like loading in the assets and how fast that goes, and like over a time lapse and whatnot. And I think the only tidbit that was interesting from all this is like the development of Project Awakening is in tandem with the Solista game engine that they're using. So the progress that they make on the game engine itself influences the direction of Project Awakening. So they're being developed like side by side as this goes, which is weird. I don't know how you do that, but that's weird.
Yeah, I'm looking at our site. Obviously, we don't cover everything, but for Project Awakening, we have 3 articles about it. We have its original announcement its initial revelation back in 2018. Then apparently we had a podcast episode about it that week. So this is back in the olden days of the podcast. And then the 1 minute trailer from this week. So 2018 had that, 19, 20, and most of 21 nothing. So that's how little we've seen of this game.
Okay, what year do you think we'll actually play this?
2026.
2020. Ow.
Wait, did you both say 26?
No, I said 2023. That's what I was
Oh
saying.
wow, 23.
Yeah, you're optimistic.
Yeah, wow,
Yeah.
that's pretty cool.
I don't think side games would think that far long term, right?
No, I don't think
never,
they're thinking that long term. Like I don't think they have a plan for 2026. I think that's just by the time they get their engine up and running, and by the time they get everything put together, that's how much time will have passed. I'm deliberately like being really conservative, though. I'm just like, let me just guess a few years out, so I don't have to think about it or whatever. But yeah, cool to know that they acknowledge the game's existence, even if it was in like a tech demo kind of context.
I feel like the when this game releases, it's like it's like the between the two eras. It's the pre Kuro localization era and the post Kuro localization era. Where does this game stay?
That's certainly one way to put it.
A few other bits of news. There's a bit here that is like some sales updates and some release dates. So we'll kind of more briskly go through these. We did get an update for the Xbox Backwards Compatibility system, including a bunch of RPGs that are now either newly backwards compatible or they're backwards compatible with the Microsoft's FPS boost. Is that the actual terminology they call it? FPS boost?
Yes, that's the terminology they use.
All right, and the headliner here, basically because it's kind of relevant to releases this year, is that the Xbox 360 version of NieR, which is NieR Gestalt featuring Papa NieR, endearingly as we call him, is now backwards compatible on the current Xbox consoles, which means that you can now play it at a consistent frame rate, which the original Xbox 360 release notoriously did not perform very well. So obviously we had the Replicant remastered earlier this year, but if you are absolutely, in the camp of Papa NieR all the way, now you can play the Xbox 360 version of the game with the FPS boost. So
yeah, the important thing to note here, like this batch of things being compatible to the Xbox, this is the final batch as far as what they're able to do. Like all the other titles is either due to licensing or some sort of like disagreement or some sort of like technical issue, so they can no longer add titles to this backwards compatible program. They've stated that they reached the limits of what they can feasibly do on here. So that was part of the announcements of the Xbox 20th anniversary stuff and whatnot. Other notable titles on this list that we mentioned earlier, Binary Domain is part of this list. Other RPGs like Risen and Sacred 2 join in. Things I liked when I saw them was 50 Cent, Blood in the Sand. Hell yeah. You got what else? Time Splitters.
Well, there were also some games that were already backwards compatible, but I guess didn't have the FPS boost treatment before, and that's like a Dragon Age series, Fallout New Vegas, Final Fantasy 13-2, and Lightning Returns. The Fallout series are an interesting one because, like, in order to get, like, Fallout New Vegas is one of my favorites, but in order to get to play nice on PC, you really have to get into like modding soup a bit. So I wonder if this, like, the console version of those games generally aren't that well received. They're usually kind of like buggy by nature, but I do wonder if you want an out of the box solution, if the FPS boost for like Fallout 3 or Fallout New Vegas actually ends up being decent. Because right now the out of the box, if you just download Fallout 3 or Fallout New Vegas from Steam and try to play it, it doesn't run very well on modern systems. So I wonder if playing it on an Xbox with the backwards compatibility and the FPS boost would actually be decent.
Well, I mean, at least for New Vegas, like, most people really want to play it with mods, like even just like the visual mods.
Well, yeah, but that's kind of why I specified if you just want to play it out of the box. But obviously, yeah, if you want to tinker with mod organizer or anything like that, then yeah. And then also the Fable 3 and Fable Anniversary as well were previously backwards compatible, but now have the FPS boost.
Yeah, so I will. There's no two bits about it. Like, Microsoft has done a completely admirable job with backwards compatibility for the last several years now, or I guess it's been longer than that. It's been like over half a decade at this point, I think. But what else can we say? Like, they've done enough that I'm completely willing to believe them when they say, look, we just, like, licensing and technical issues, this is all we can do. Because they've made, like, well over 1,000 games backwards compatible on Xbox One and Series X, and that's a massive undertaking.
Yeah, I mean, hell, it was a crazy project, and they saw it to the completion. And I agree with you that they've been open and honest enough over the past decade, to, like, we've known now, like, video game licensing very, very tricky and hard, So
yeah. It's a shame that less people will be able to understand the concept of love, but you're just gonna have to get an original Xbox for that, or get an original Xbox disc, and then you know what to do.
Yep.
But man, licensing's hard. But yeah, it's really cool. Like, not just like the backwards compatibility itself, but the fact that Microsoft has gone out of their way to increase the resolution for some of these games, increase the FPS for some of these games. Like, one of the first games I played on that Xbox I just got was Sonic Unleashed at 60 FPS, because I'd never played it except for like the daytime stages as a mod for the PC version of Sonic Generations. And it's like, these Werehog segments aren't that bad if it's at 60 FPS, it seems like.
Uh-oh. You know what? It's not pretty good, actually.
The title of the podcast, the Werehog is not that bad, completely out of context.
Uh-oh.
But yeah, it's just really cool seeing them do all this. I hope the fact that they said that they're not adding any new titles doesn't preclude any additional like enhancement patches. I still dream of a day that Lost Odyssey can be played at 4K 60.
Oh yeah, I didn't even think about that. That's a big bummer that they never got to that.
Well, we don't know if they won't do any more enhancements because they haven't specified that. Right. I'd imagine that they won't, but they haven't outright said it like the same way.
You're telling me there's a chance.
There's a chance. Either emulation will get there or Microsoft will get there, whoever does it first.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. But yeah, really cool stuff. Unironically, the only reason I really own an Xbox, but
yeah,
it's a decent enough excuse.
We have a couple sales updates. One of them is for Story of Seasons, Friends of Mineral Town. It surpassed 1 million sales worldwide. So I think it reached the milestone slower than Pioneers of Olive Town, but still 1 million for that series is pretty remarkable. There is a new update coming to Pioneers of Olive Town, where it introduces like spirit quests and new outfits and other details that we have in the press release up on the news post on the site, new farming abilities and things like that. So both of those games are seemingly doing pretty well for Marvelous, and 1 million is nothing to sneeze at. The Super Robot Wars series has also surpassed 19 million copies overall for the whole series. How many games is that, Josh?
That's I don't know. It's over 90. It's over 90.
Oh Jesus! I was gonna make it. Okay, this is how out of touch I am. I was gonna make a joke and say like, well, we just got Super Robot Wars 30, so there's at least 30 games. All right, so 19 million over 30 games. That's okay. But 19 million over, well, I don't know. Those numbers are too big that I can't like contextualize. Is that good or not good?
It's one of those things, right? Like you have to think about time and place. There's an extremely niche series in terms of like there's a crossover aspect over like a lot of anime. Like it has like the Guinness Book of World Records of like the series that has like the most anime IP crossovers. That's the title it holds because there's been so much over the years ever since its launch on the Game Boy in 1991. And a lot of these games, a vast majority of them never saw a worldwide release, So given time and place, extremely niche. That's still a pretty good number for the amount that, for the extremely niche appeal of the series. I think it's one hell of a landmark, and I wonder how much of Super Robot Wars 30 did contribute to that 19 million. I really wonder how well this game has been selling.
Right, especially as an inflection point for a global release, like a truly global release. Even if it's limited only to Steam for official Western releases, but maybe an inflection point where it'll perform more strongly per entry from this.
So I mean, it's remarkable to see. Hopefully, we continue this trend of like global worldwide simultaneous releases for the series. That'd be. It's awesome, I'm always rooting for this series. It's such a cool thing that you don't really see in any other series ever in video games,
Yeah.
So here's to more, why not? 30 years have passed. 30 years more. Let's go.
Here we've got a bunch of upcoming release dates for some indie games or some AA games or games that have gotten kind of windows announced for next year. So I'll just kind of semi rapid fire through these. Mechjammer is a horror CRPG. Cyberpunk also, where it's releasing on December 2nd. So this is from Whale Knot Studios, an indie studio.
This looks really cool.
It's got like a really grungy kind of art style, so it's kind of that sort of dystopian cyberpunk sort of feel to it. We got Wolfstride is launching for Steam on December 7th, and this is a game that Josh, you actually played when it was on the last Steam Festival, correct?
Yeah, I wrote a preview up for it, and I really liked what I saw. It's a cool little like concept that they have on their hands. Like it's like a turn-based, almost front mission style, like head-to-head 1v1. Large emphasis on like taking out parts of the robot. Each part has like their own separate HP.
Yeah,
and whatnot.
it's a mecha brawler turn-based RPG.
Mhm. Yeah,
So.
it's a cool thing. It's like it has this whole black and white tone to it, like a grayscale aesthetic.
Mm-hmm. Loop Hero is releasing for Nintendo Switch on December 9th. So this was a PC-only release that launched back in March, I believe. And
Game Awards nominee.
Yeah, so when we discussed it back in March, we might have talked about how it would have been a good fit on Switch. And it's now releasing on Switch in a couple weeks. So December 9th, Loop Hero on Switch. We got a port announcement for Vaporum Lockdown. It will be releasing on PlayStation consoles and Xbox One on December 10th. I guess this had already been out on PC. This is kind of a first-person Grimrock style dungeon crawler. So it released on PC late last year, and I guess it released on Switch earlier this year, but now it is coming to the other consoles in December. Moon, which obviously released on Switch last year as a remaster from its original PlayStation 1 release. It actually made our top 10 RPGs. It'll be releasing for PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5 on December 16th. What else do we got? Disgaea RPG, which has been available on mobile devices, will be releasing in English on PC for Steam at some point in either in December of this year or early next year in 2022. I guess it's already got a Japanese version on PC, but this is for
I don't know. I think the Japanese version is like on DMM games probably. I can't imagine it's on Steam. If it did get a PC release. And then the English version came out, several months ago in English as well. So
right, yeah. So it's already available in English on mobile devices, but now it's already available on PC in Japan, but now it's getting a Steam English release either next month or next year.
More mobile gacha games on Steam. Woo! Let's
and
go.
Then this is a game that I think we covered when it got first announced. It's kind of a an indie Souls-like kind of Bloodborne-y title, which I know me just saying that I'm almost groaning at how like banal that sounds, but it has a really interesting aesthetic with like plague doctors and things like that. Thymesia. It was originally slated for this year, and as you know, it never really got its release date announced, so we kind of figured it would be delayed into 2022. And Team 17, the publisher behind it, basically said that they're planning to delay until 2022. No release date, just saying that confirming that it's not coming this year. Finally, this is kind of an interesting one. Fantasy Life Online will be ending service in Japan in the middle of December, and this is coming not long after the announcement of Bolt Ren Games planning to release Fantasy Life Online in the West. So this is a kind of an interesting combination of announcements that we don't know if this cancellation in Japan will affect the Western release, but I guess there's also precedent here based on the Arc the Lad game. So what happened in that case?
Arc the Lad R, it's still going. I checked their Facebook like about a week or so ago. It's still doing planned events and updates, even though it's shut down in Japan. There's this is the second game consecutively for Bolt Ren Games where they announced the localization at a Western release for a mobile game, and then like a week or so later, maybe the Japanese publisher and developer is shutting doors for service. So Supposedly, this will continue to run as normally as it can until who knows when it's shutting down. Like Arc the Ladder is still going. I don't know what it must still have a user base or a player base of some sorts. It's still worth justifying
Yeah,
keeping services running, I guess.
and
Even though it has even though there's like a definite end date, I imagine, because there's only so much content.
you would presume they would do their market research and say like, all right, we can make this a profitable venture. So
And you know what? There's not even I forgot if the Bolt Red also localized and Idola Fantasy Star Saga, the mobile game. Um, that shut. I don't know if the Japanese game shut down already or or is still just announced, but they definitely announced ending services for that in Japan. I don't know if they also announced that the English one is shutting down or not. I didn't look into that. Or if it's still just going to run as normal as well.
Yeah.
So Bolt Red really racking up a reputation for picking up games that are either have been announced to shut down or have already shut down in Japan. This guy RPG, also by Bolt Red, it's still ongoing. For how long? Who knows? But yeah, that's
yeah, it's kind
Bolt
of
Red
like a
really knows
death
what
now,
they're
like a black spot. Like, Bolt Red's
Yeah.
involved.
Yeah, really weird stuff. Really weird stuff.
And that kind of covers us for this podcast. So, as normal this time of year, it seems like we have a lot of stuff sliding into place for Q1 of next year. We're finally getting an idea of what the slate of games is going to look like going into Game of the Year, and the Game Awards have kind of shown us what they're looking at, and we're kind of getting our ideas together about what we want to kind of finalize and get looked at when we go into our own deliberations. So cool to see they talk about Pokemon, about Ruined King. Hopefully Platinum ends up taking good feedback for Babylon's Fall and some of the updates for Strangers of Paradise and the RGG Studios games that are in the works. As always, you can read all about the articles that we've talked about up on our website, including the Babylon's Fall preview and the Monster Rancher interview at rpgsite.net. You can follow us on any of the social media platforms, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. We do currently have a Twitter giveaway for the next couple of days. I believe it's going through until Wednesday, the 24th, for a chance to win the Shin Megami Tensei Fall of Man edition. If you're living in North America, just go ahead and follow us and retweet that tweet to have a chance to enter that raffle. And I do believe the plan is to meet back for the Tetracast next week, even though it'll be a couple days after the holiday for some of us in North America. So you will likely hear from us then. Until then, stay safe, take care. We'll talk to you next time.
Cyberpunk Let's Go Game Awards. Woo!